Hello, welcome in everybody. Hope you're having a great what day is it? Monday. I'm disorganized. We are joined here by our guest Fleet Dietrich, and I'm very excited to have them on. We're a little late because we've literally just been shooting the shit. So, Fleet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What you do?
Hey y'all, I'm Fleet. My pronouns are they, she. You can find me at Fleet_Dietrich on Twitter. I am a TTRPG designer, award-winning actual play player, and I stream on my own channel, Fleetwood Flack on Twitch. I'm playing a lot of Gas Station Simulator, and I also do design work live. So I'm currently working on My Mother's Kitchen, a solo journaling game where you play a ghost trapped inside of your family's cookbook, trying to remember things to set yourself free. So that's coming out. I'm going to be crowdfunding for it end of January, around January 23rd on Crowdfunder. So give me a follow on Twitter and stay updated because this thing's going to slap that ass.
Hell yeah! And yeah, Fleet doesn't know this. I have a culinary background, and that's really nostalgic for me. So I'm
Hey,
definitely going to be tossing some money your way. That sounds awesome.
thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. That's awesome. That's probably gonna make me cry because I'm a big crybaby. I love.
You will. It's a lot of like watching people die and watching recipes change. So good luck.
Oh no, you can't do that to me.
I'm gonna fucking do it.
Well, we're really happy to have you, Fleet. And folks, if you don't know the rules of the show, I'm throwing them up on the screen right now. So, let's see here. Kane says red is a big crybaby. Kane will remember that. Hey, well, glad to see you, Kane. I am a big crybaby. Oh, I cry at the people are like, "Oh, you're a big, strong, evil-looking dude." Like, dude, I cry all the fucking time. I'm such a big baby. Hey, thanks for the resub, boss. I appreciate you. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with prompts. Fleet, would you like to give your first word?
All right. My first word is miasma.
No way. No way your first word's
Did you
miasma.
also have miasma?
Last week we had miasma.
Oh no! Okay, hold on, hold
No,
on,
no,
hold
no.
on, hold on.
There's nothing wrong with that.
That's
I
really
have.
funny.
You know what? Let me jump to the next one and consider some things. The next word I have is igneous.
Igneous, okay. I mean, no, I'm not kidding.
Igneous.
It's scrolling up. We literally had miasma as one of our words.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I am the miasma.
Igneous. Igneous. Am I? No. See, autocorrect tried to save me, and then I messed myself up. Okay. So, igneous. What's your thought process behind igneous there?
So igneous is a word I discovered playing Gloomhaven. We were doing bit characters with, and this was original Gloomhaven before all the new releases. So it was like the box had just come out. All of my friends and I were working at a game store at the time. We all split the huge box 4 ways because we couldn't afford it otherwise. I don't know if everyone's familiar, but Gloomhaven's enormous. It was like $160 at the time, and on like a board game salary, not great. But I played the rock sorcerer, so I named her Dr. Igneous, which is, I had to like look it up. I was like scrolling through the Wikipedia of all the words, which is the hardest rock, the hardest kind of rock in the world. Igneous rock is very dense, it's very thick, it's hard to break. And yeah, I thought it was really cool. Now I kind of, whenever I want something, like if I'm describing a suit of armor, if I'm describing skin texture, igneous is often a word I'll use that comes to mind.
Igneous is a great. Yeah, it's very evocative. It's just
Yeah,
like
it's very strong, and it's Latin too, so it's also like there is an elevation to the idea. It's not just like hard or crunchy. It's like almost scientifically clinical, which I really like.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's a word that I would use in
It's a
my
good word.
writing. It's just like it's like hard. When I think of igneous, I think of like hard, like dark red, dark brown kind of rocks and stuff like that. Thank you for the follow, by the way.
No problem. No problem. I'm on it, so I thought I'd follow.
No, you're
Yeah,
fine.
I was gonna say I was right on with Kane on that too, because I was thinking about, I'm like, I'm pretty sure igneous's Latin root is like metal as fuck too. It's literally of fire or from
Yeah.
fire born, which is like the
It's,
sickest shit.
I am a Merkborge person. I do. If you want to visit my itch page, I have some pretty heavy metal shit, but like fucking it's good. It's like a very hardcore word that's almost religious in its terminology and the use of like Latin. It's almost like I feel like a priest would use it in an exorcism or something. I'm Jewish, by the way, so I don't know a priest. Just want to throw that one out there.
No, that's fair. I could very much see that. I was raised Catholic once.
I'm so sorry.
Atle,
It's okay.
Igneos.
I got lucky.
Lorem ipsum.
Yep.
I love that word, absolutely. And what's really funny is we had a society that's like bitterly cold. Like we made a civilization, the last one, that's just like super cold. And miasma is one of the words that they used. The fact that we have the opposite, very cool. Omni, no pun intended. Omni, what's your first word, buddy?
No, you're good. I do like that. I do like that sort of shift we've gone through. I've got 3 that I'm actually kind of excited about. The first one is going to be dread.
Dread.
We've kind of danced around, like, I've been trying my best to challenge myself to actually bring darker words to this setting for once, as opposed to me being the guy who's like, the happy hope words and the noble.
I'm the grim dark guy. Like I'm the guy that's like always just like doom, gloom, horrible things.
And so I'm like, I'm gonna try to channel a little of my red and bring it in, because like I know we've talked about the psychology of it, but I just kind of like the evocative nature of dread. So this setting has a creeping kind of threat in it, and the war that's spreading, everything's being cast. It's sort of like the first 2 like books / movies of Lord of the Rings, where it's like there's this building threat, and by the time you get to the 3rd one, you're like, okay, well, at this point, like, no matter how shitty it's going to be, we've already seen how bad this is going to get. Like, we're in those first 2 books, we're seeing the creeping dread, the weight of everything filling the area. So yeah, go with dread.
And I like that. It has it does, like, it's like you said, it has a weight to it. I think that word, it's ever present, but it's not tangible, and I do really like that. Like, it's not something you can hold or see. It just kind of is in the cracks of the things you can see.
Yeah, it's existential.
I do like that. Yeah. Okay. Greek philosopher, existential. Let's talk about metaphysics next.
Atle, Igneos.
Catholic world.
Ooh, I'm not Catholic.
It's cool. This chat has been ordained. Anyway, continue.
This is actually sponsored by the Catholic Church. No, but
Oh no!
Oh god, I thought I ran far enough.
You can't escape them, no matter where you go. My first word is actually something that Omni would come up with, because this is actually kind of a nice word. It's cultivate.
Ooh, I love this.
So we have this igneous, dread, and cultivate. My thoughts behind cultivate is like we've been asked the question multiple times in chat about different things. Just like, what do these people eat? What do they grow? Like, what do they do? Like farming wise, like what do they do? That kind of thing. So, and igneous. I'm talking in Latin now. Igneous. Igneous, dread, and cultivate. Dread doesn't really fit in with the idea that I had here, but cultivate and igneous go together really well, because in areas where there's active volcanoes, land is very rich, like the soil is
fertile.
Very rich. Yeah. You're gonna have a lot
and
of
by fireborn volcano fire. Sorry. We actually talked about this ahead of time. So you can head out if you want. Like,
yeah, you're right. My bad.
You're not fitting in.
All right, that's fine. Peace. See you next episode. I'll just let these 2 carry it. Yeah, I'm just gonna
the stream ends. It's just a little broken computer icon in the center of the screen.
It's a little broken computer with a broken heart.
Yeah.
Sad beeping noises. But so
I do like that though. That's a really cool thing.
I'm also a Magic the Gathering player, so cultivate's like an auto include in any sort of like deck with green in it. So I just think cultivate's just a very important.
Hell yeah. Just had my magic cards up there. I like the art. So I just
Is
have
that
them.
Auramancer? What is that?
It is Auramancer.
Oh, I got it! I can't believe it. I'm
It is
so
fucking
good at this
Auramancer.
game.
Oh my god.
Can we
shit.
talk to you about
Easy.
playing Magic on
Is
stream
that-
in the future?
Yeah, of course.
Auramancer, is that Rebecca Guay?
It
Red,
is.
if you're-
Yes!
It is Rebecca
Oh!
Guay.
Red, your power is
Give me the year.
untethered.
Give me the fucking year, Red.
The year Auramancer came out.
Give me the year.
Oh, when did Auramancer come out? I want to
Close
say.
your eyes. I don't believe you don't have it right in front of you.
Okay, it's close. 2003.
2013.
No, wait. Oh, okay, that's a reprint though, right?
Yeah, it's a reprint. I don't actually know when the other one came out.
I was gonna say
Hold
that's
on,
gotta
I
be
got
like 2003. Rebecca Guay had a lot of.
She's old school, yeah.
Yeah, like around like Tempest Block and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm not that old. I just like old Magic. So
Sure.
I'm really not. I'm actually one of the youngest people in the TTRPG community. Period. So
You are. You're the young gun.
21.
I have to go. I didn't agree to this.
I always tease people about their age. So yeah, cultivate green stuff. You know,
I like
farming, etc., etc. Because like I said, people have been asking in the chat, like, what does this group eat? Well, how do they survive? What do they do? And cultivate can be more than just like I'm cultivating crops. You could be cultivating animals, like for animal husbandry and stuff like that. But
If we're doing dread, we could also cultivate people. What does the volcano eat, you know?
what does the volcano eat? Sounds like a great like name for an adventure. Like I could see that.
What does the volcano eat?
It's wild to me that Red is a whole 4 years younger than me. I'm younger than a lot of people. Don't even sweat it. But yeah, cultivate. So let's go on to your second word before I get to anybody else. Any more existential
You
dread?
got it. So we're gonna go on to another one called martyrdom.
Oh.
We're gonna go martyrdom for my second word. I've been starting work because I've been avoiding finishing my mother's kitchen. As you do when you're a designer. As soon as you have a second idea, you're like, I gotta write something different about cults on a mount, about warring cults on the same mountain, the sleeping giant. So martyrdom's on my head, in my mind a lot, and I was just thinking a lot about like, oh, cults. I'm playing Saint Joan as a Malkavian elder or Enselai in a Vampire the Masquerade game. So the idea of like sainthood, martyrdom, sacrifice, it's something that I've just been in my head. So when martyrdom popped in, I was like, okay, let's roll. It's evocative and can be really good. It can be very dark because I feel like religious zealotry is wound up in it, as well as like it could be very hopeful. I think it has a lot of space to be different things and mean different things.
Martyrdom is definitely one of those words that instantly clicks with me because I like the idea of like grandiose self-sacrifice in the service of something else. It's just like it feels really like righteous.
It feels righteous, but I feel like it also feels very saccharine, very like, ooh, something about it makes me be like, I don't like that person. If like martyred, like it makes me think of like a bad mom who like continuously makes her children feel guilty, or like that shitty like student in school who's like, I've done all the work, like that kind of like that. I don't know. I've always also been drawn to like fake martyrdom as well. I think like both of them hand in hand draw me.
Martyrdom, like the modern age, really isn't like the word itself is supposed to imply someone that, you know, it's supposed to be a thing where you're like, oh, this person is martyred for the cause. They just died for a thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing on them. But 9 times out of 10, martyrdom is forced on the dead without their consent. So
also,
yeah, I get that.
A martyr, and then so instead of using the word martyr, which I think is more personal, martyrdom is an act. So the act of giving the status of martyr, the sort of, it's almost like, it sounds like kingdom to me. And I've always felt like the idea of it's an order, it's a class order, it's a spiritual order, it's an elevation of a class status of spirituality, very much the way royalty is. So that also drew me to it.
Oh, also, Red, can I just quickly take a moment to say something? Just one, I'm loving this word. And 2, it bothers me that you were within 2 years of the year that card was originally printed in Odyssey. Fuck you.
Wait, I almost got Odyssey was 2001.
It was 01. You were 2 years old.
Yeah, you tell me the set, I could probably name the year.
Yeah,
I'm pretty wild. Yeah, now Fleet's thinking about it. Like, I'm gonna find a random set you've never heard of.
Yeah, no. I love that word actually. It actually weirdly gels in a little bit with what we did last session as well, which I kind of like.
Sorta. We didn't really yeah, the society itself had a lot of emphasis on it, but we didn't have like I like the idea of Mars, especially considering this world's like post-war and everybody's really desperate. So it's just like everybody's looking for something to cling to, kind of like that cult-like mentality. It's like everybody's like has a lot of
Yeah.
self-doubt and like they don't feel confident in themselves or like the future of things. So they need definites. So what's more like defined than death itself? So like the idea of just being like, oh yeah, we live in the martyrdom. It's like, what does that mean? It's like you should be willing to die for anything for this country. It's like that's hyper fascist, but it's like it's also very interesting for like storytelling of people trying to break away from those bounds. So
It's true.
There's a very interesting concept in the city of Grift in Merkborg, which I change a lot because the trigger warning suicide. There's a piece in the sort of lore of the world, and they don't have a lot of lore because it's not an OSE, but the lore they do give in the city of Grift, like the premise is the world is ending. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no stopping it. It's going to end. The king of Grift is known as a coward, quote unquote. This is kind of why I change it, because I'm like, oh, I don't want to play with people who call suicide cowards. People tend to like that. But in the idea is he makes his entire kingdom kill themselves versus go to the end of the apocalypse. So the idea of martyrdom and the idea of self-sacrifice as a like law is very cool and it's very sort of compelling. I think that there's a lot of ground for it in terms of weaving it into like a governmental practice in a place.
yeah, and like the whole idea that you pitched of the idea of like a martyrdom is like you reminds me of a kingdom. Like why couldn't we just call this entire territory a martyrdom?
Martyrdom.
It also emphasizes heavily. Yeah, it emphasizes heavily what you're expected to do as a citizen. So like
martyrdom.
just like you should be willing to lay down your life for any cost. So everybody that basically means anybody and everybody's a militia, like a Minuteman. You know, like they're always like you should be ready to go to the front lines just in case anything ever happens, and you should always listen to your superiors. Blah blah blah. It's like, oh okay. So,
and it's like when it's very much personal is political, personal is like battle oriented. Obviously, they're going to be very war oriented if it's a martyrdom.
or war-oriented which is my next. No, I'm kidding. Oriented's a great word. That's like really goofy, but it sounds like something you'd hear in like a 1980s like punk.
You wouldn't know. You're 21.
Yeah, you're right.
You would know.
Damn.
You have the Google exists.
I'm wearing a Journey t-shirt. Yeah, no, I'm actually 41 years old. This is a toupee. But what's your second word, boss? I really like martyrdom, by the way. That's like giving me so many ideas.
The image of that, Red, of that, like you're just gonna stand up and pull your hair off and just like walk off, Walter White.
Okay, look, my hair is already thinning. I don't want to talk about it. I do not.
That's
like
fair.
My hair
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay.
Okay. That's fair. All right. So I'm gonna go with the word bayonet as my second.
Ooh, okay. We're starting to make a cool thing.
So I obviously, like, we talk about this being a post-war society, but it's also a pre-war society because we're very clearly like we are patterning this world, even though it's set in an era that's more reminiscent of like pre-World War I by a bit, like post-Napoleonic. Like, even though we're in that era, like in terms of how the setting is shaking out, it really feels more like it's post-World War I. Like, because we just finished a big fuck off collapse of an empire, collapse of a society, and now we're getting ready for everyone stepping up to the plate to go ham on each other for all their built up little bullshit reasons. You know, because it's a world, and now that the big superpower's gone, they're all going to beat the crap out of each other until either a new superpower emerges or they all get it out of their system. And Bayonet is such an image. Like, we don't really talk about that in the modern age. There's not the concept of bayoneting someone in modern warfare is...
I'll bayonet you, baby.
Like...
I pay a lot for my monthly bayoneting streaming on OnlyFans.
Look, I'm just saying, if someone walks into my house, I'm going to kill them like the founding fathers intended, with a triangular blade that they can't possibly patch up.
Top 10 bayonettings. Number 1, the Spear of Longinus.
And cue Ava music. But yeah, no.
No, I'm talking. Never mind. Go on.
I know what you're at anyway. Sorry, I was trying to bring it to the anime. But point is that like bayoneting as an image is something that's sort of fallen a little bit out of modern warfare. We think of modern warfare as, oh, close quarters. You mean pistols. You mean beating the crap out of each other with the butts of your guns. Like the idea of drawing a knife, putting it on the end of your gun and running in is kind of archaic. It's why we see it in a lot of arcade minis.
Sabers and like the idea, like we still have a lot of terminology left over, like saber rattling, but you don't use like sword fighting anymore. The idea of like swords and steel, things that are hard and difficult, igneous, it has faded out. Oh, it's okay, Nick.
That was a good time.
I like that. I like that. Just grab that little chain link and just
bayonets made out of rocks.
I do love that image. But yeah, there's something about the imagery of 2 units of dudes looking out over a no man's land, and one of them being like, okay, boys, girls, people of all ages who are unfortunately in this trench with me, take out the big sharp knives and turn your guns into spears, and let's go utterly gut those dudes as we run through bullets. And they're like, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, and that's how grim the world was at that time.
Yeah, I mean, the mainstream use of bayonets fell off after World War I, after they realized that bayonets were not effective because you were doing a lot of close quarter combat fighting in the trenches. The last thing you would want is your rifle, which rifles at the time were a little over 4.5, 5 feet long. They were really long weapons. The last thing you want is a whole ass spear when you're fighting this close in the trenches. So they fashioned they took their bayonets off and they took them to their smithy and said, hey, can you make this a fucking knife? Because I'm not fighting somebody with a spear where I only have like 3 feet of like width to like move around in. So
horrifyingly, there was only one instance that wasn't true, and I found this out, which is, or at least one primary instance, which is that in America, our utilization of trench guns was the one time we wanted a bayonet on the end of our gun, because the primary purpose is you ram it into someone, you hold the trigger down, and then you just chamber, and it auto fires. So it was like the most horrifying thing I've ever heard of, where it's like we took the idea of a bayonet and brought it to its extreme edge, and even that was like machine guns better. Like,
isn't that just basically like glue on tape? You know?
Yeah, it's a little. It was overkill.
It's excessive.
Yeah, like there's really no one's gonna survive a shot from a weapon like that within like 5 feet. So the idea to run to someone, stab them, and then unload like three trench gun rounds into them.
But no point.
Unless you're playing D&D, no one has that many hit points. Like, no one's gonna be like, oh yeah, I ate 3 rounds of buckshot and I can still attack you back. No one's gonna do that. But the imagery of it is that it's not just effective, it's brutal. There's something savage about that.
We're also thinking like bayonets, bayonets are still going to be in common use because this is like mid to late Victorian era of technology. So like we're approaching the Edwardian era, but we're still a ways off. So bayonets would still very much be a thing. And
here's the deal, right? We're in like the idea of martyrdom is not very Victorian era because the idea of martyrdom didn't really survive until during the industrial age. It's sort of a bygone age. It's more of a status now than an actual belief. So if we're talking and using the idea of martyrdom and the idea of solidity and the idea of like cultivation and rock, there's something very natural about this. There's something that's very like pre-enlightenment about these words that bayonet really that predate bayonet as something. So that's an interesting dichotomy that we're now looking at with these sort of groupings.
So we're talking about an empire that might be just a little bit regressed compared to other civilizations.
I think they hit a cultural destruction. I think like pre-war, they were all put together really well. Like let's talk the Ottoman Empire here because like this is a great example. So the Ottoman Empire, one of the most technologically advanced like empires at the world at the time during World War One. But then come the end of World War One, they fell apart, and all these nations like heavily regressed, like culture-wise and technology-wise, because they didn't have any overarching thing. So this country could have had really advanced technology. They could have been like on the brink of an industrial revolution, but then this war just decimated them and just like, okay, we need to go back to basics.
It wasn't a war; it was the volcano.
Oh yeah, well that's a great idea.
I like
and
that.
Then because then like we have someone who like the idea is, you know, like if we're really referencing World War One, you have the major powers, but most of the major powers that were there were already solidified. If we're deviating, how cool would it be to have an unknown rise up and be now part of this? Of like, and honestly, I'm going to throw a word your way that's gonna, I think, is gonna fit really well with this discussion. And I'll wait my little turn, but yeah, I think like for me, an unknown threat born in the Dark Ages and leaning into fascism is a really scary concept. It's like, okay, we have all the old players, the old squabbles that predate decades and generations and centuries, but what do you do when there's a new player on the field? I like that concept a lot.
Yeah, we have like a very Mount Vesuvius type situation going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like the center of their culture was destroyed, so now they have like these remaining like echoes of their culture, and that are, they've fallen back a lot.
Mhm.
Skag said, "Cough, cough, Atlantis." Yeah, very much so. Just like these guys,
Yeah.
kind of like embodied like lost civilization kind of vibe. So very cool.
I want to address. I think Kane said martyrdom still gets used in context of rebel groups, but it's not really used as a religious indicator anymore, in a spiritual way. And I think that's the hook for me. Is like it's now used to indicate like status and like you've done something powerful, but very few people buy into the idea of you are chosen by God, that there's an elevation there. So I think that's, for me, is what makes it exciting. Is it's this archaic idea with these kind of newfound technology. I think that's pretty cool.
Awesome. Yeah, we've been on Bayonet for a while. Really great word on me. Like that inspired a lot of talking.
Thank you. Appreciate it. What about you, boss? What do you got?
So my next word is irregulars.
Ooh, okay. So I'm just gonna say this. As an old Warhammer player, I fucking love that word. I love
oh my god, you play Warhammer?
I played Warhammer Fantasy Battles before that shit imploded with the Force of 1,000 Suns and broke its fan
This is
base
why we were late
so
today,
many
as you were
pieces.
talking about Warhammer.
Yeah.
But no,
Back,
I love the idea of irregular troops. They are so fucking cool. Red, take this shit and run with it. I want to hear where you're going.
So, I mean, we're talking about this society that's sort of just been destroyed by volcanoes. And it's like that's an idea. I like that idea so much. Let's just run with it. So, what would they wouldn't have like a regiment. They wouldn't have like one fixed regiment. Nobody's wearing like bright red coats or badges on their hats. They're literally just a culmination of a bunch of random people. So what would their irregulars look like? Would they be using bayonets? They would definitely idealize the idea of martyrdom. They'd have like a strange sort of thing. It's just like they'd be like, since we're talking Warhammer, they'd have like something like Tal, like a bonding knife ritual. So like when one of us dies, it's like we should use the power of the other, and we remember them and like spiritually keep them in our thoughts. Or better yet, I mean, martyrs, like they could literally just be the religious figures, because we have this theme going on in the world where there isn't really like gods necessarily, but they revere and they hold high regular people that once existed. So the whole idea of that Franklin guy, he went off and got his head blown off like by a cannonball, but it was really cool.
So there's a book. There's God, it's from the 80s or the early 90s. I can't remember what it's called. I read it recently and I didn't like it, but because like it had a very good promise but very poor execution. It's by Shirley something, and the reason it's her name stuck with me is because by a woman. The idea is that there was like this sci-fi, people were making clones, they were making robots, and there was a cataclysmic event that destroyed everything and threw it back to the Dark Ages, medieval times, sort of very Numenera, like old ways on the ancient city kind of idea, like built on the tech. But what they would do is that they would have these villages that you would go to, and in them you would be like, oh, there's a hero, there's like all these old story tropes that lived on, very Joseph Campbell style. But you could only have one of each. Like there could only be one beggar girl, there could only be one drunken lech, and you would be put into these places to conserve resources. No one really knew why, but you had to like fit the tropes. And what this makes me think of for irregulars is when you leave, when you have to depart, you leave the role entirely. You are losing your community when you're an irregular. And what is irregular but a deviation from a pattern? It's an irregularity. So what is the pattern that is set up now in this world that is being broken by these people, rather than it's a mishmash of stuff, if an irregularity indicates pattern. So it's like, if we have, I don't know, that's what it's kind of spiraling me to think of, right?
I think that's valid AF.
Yeah,
like we're taking it from the military standing, but that's a very practical take on it too, and I like that.
Yeah, I like it a lot as well. I mean, the whole idea of like these people, even in like their small communities, struggle to find their place. Even if their place is something, just like your place is to go and die. It's like, okay, great. I guess that's my place. That's the whole idea of the martyrdom. It's like, oh, your place is to go and die for some reason.
It's crusades, right? It's crusades. And what are the Crusades if not sort of Inquisition fetishes, if not like that martyrdom taken to a whole new level? No offense to the Inquisition. You did nasty things to my people, so
Okay,
like
no, I'm
whatever.
Spanish.
But...
Full offense to the
full
fucking
offense,
Inquisition.
yeah.
Full offense. I'm Catholic
I-
and I'm Spanish historically.
I'm Irish,
Fuck
okay?
off
Like
with the Inquisition.
fuck the Catholic Church. uh, full offense. Come at me. But
no offense to
And
the
any
Inquisition.
listeners in the chat, you know we're calling you out.
But no, I like the idea. We're talking Crusades now because of the irregulars and thing. The Crusades were literally meant to like take the knights out of Western Europe, have them stop killing and maiming their own people, and give them an actual purpose. So the idea of like them taking martyrdom because their people have gotten like so hopeless and violent and like they just don't have any morals. It's just like, let's give them some morals by showing that dying is actually a good thing. So like, or dying for a good reason is the thing that you should aspire to do. Like, yeah, people, everybody ends up drinking the Kool-Aid one way or another, or if they don't, they leave. And it's I really like the idea of like just send like these these are crusaders. It's just like these are a bunch of regular like peasant farmers that are they're fashioning pitchforks into spears and stuff like that. So
oh my god.
Or maybe it's the
Bretonian militia
reverse.
image.
Maybe it's the reverse. Maybe the irregulars are the people who can't stop killing. Maybe they've entered a martyrdom era of peace, and it's like it's an honor to die, and the irregulars are like, no, it's an honor to kill.
What
so
if we
there's
play
a there's
with
a
both
cultural
these ideas?
what's the word
Division.
I'm looking for? Division. Yeah, I'm trying to there's a word. There's a word for it. Schism. Like there's a big schism going on with the
Very Jedi. Very Jedi.
Yeah. It's like, oh, there's a Jedi schism going on. But no, the whole idea of just like, yeah, this culture is there are people that are struggling to keep the old ways, and there's people that are just like, fuck it, just embrace what we have now. Literally, our capital city is gone. It got eaten by a volcano. So like, we should just try to move on and like come up with our new own like this is an opportunity to change. And a lot of, as we've seen with humanity, they don't like change very much. So kind of tracks, yeah.
I love that.
And these
by the way,
these irregulars are probably people that, yeah, like Fleet was saying, like these irregulars are probably just people that are just like, yeah, we don't want to give up the old ways of just killing our enemies. Like we just want to like make sure that this place is safe. So like, and the whole idea of like, I'm a martyr because I'm giving my life so you can continue living in this old crappy way or in this newfangled fancy way. It's like, and I'm gonna go do the old way where I go and die for my country after getting shot and dying 3 days later of sepsis.
Well, it's like that interesting thing, right? Of like there was a whole documentary around the alt-right and full offense if you're alt-right here, full offense. You know exactly
Absolutely
what kind of
full
person I
offense.
am coming
yeah,
on
no,
this shit.
absolutely agreed.
But
Fuck you, alt-right.
yeah, if you're here and you're alt-right, you're in the wrong fucking chat, my bro. But the idea is like these people, like there's a quote of like, I'll die to defend my family, I'll die to defend my country, but you don't want to live to protect it. You don't want to actually put the work. It's more dramatic to die and fight than it is to do the small incremental day-to-day work of adjusting and fixing and working. So I think that's kind of what I'm hearing now from this discussion of like, oh yeah, I want to go and fight and die, but to like live and rebuild is not as exciting to some people. And I think that might be part of what we're looking at with this word set.
Yeah, that's really interesting in the regard that it's just like, yeah, the prospect of rebuilding is so unbelievably daunting that death is more palatable.
I mean, that is literally a like again. So making the pop culture reference here, but I think it's a relevant one here. Is there's an episode of Rick and Morty where one of the characters like literally calls out Rick, and they're like, the problem that you have is that you're so smart. The idea of just maintenance is a
Therapy
thing you don't
episode.
want to do. Yeah,
That's the Pickle Rick episode.
It is the Pickle Rick episode. I just didn't want to say
Pickle
that.
Rick episode.
Yeah, it is. It's a Pickle Rick episode. But at the end, they're literally, she's like, the problem for you is that there's no way for you to do it so badly that you can die. There's no excitement into it. There's no excitement to glean from brushing my teeth or wiping my ass. There's no way to do it so bad that everyone dies. There's no risk, but you need to do it. And these people look at Reconstruction in the same way as like this. There's no adventure. There's no excitement. There's no grand heroism. It's just the boring, obnoxious, unpleasant task of bureaucracy, of reconstruction, of literally just building. And while for a lot of people that's exciting, if you take the same people that want to go out and camp in the middle of nowhere, you take the same people that wanted to design a cathedral, there might not be overlap there. It could be both,
Sure.
but in this civilization where they've existed in this brutal, savage, and when I say savage, I mean savage mindset of brutality, of cruelty towards others.
Mhm.
That is a hard thing to shake when they're like, you have a better life. All you have to do is renounce the easy morality you've had for a long time. And they're like, but that's fun. And that's easy. And it asks little of us. So sure, we'll stay there. I like that imagery.
I think there's also like, to reference an older pop culture, the Greek tragedy of Agamemnon.
Oh my god. Pickle
Where-
right to
Yeah, you know,
Agamemnon. I love this.
Little older.
Well, a little older, but in Agamemnon, the reason he even leaves for the war, the reason he even goes to Troy is because he sacrifices Iphigenia, his youngest daughter. It's just why he comes home and is murdered by his wife after he respects the gods by like walking the purple carpet. He kills his daughter to get the winds from Poseidon in order to sail to Troy. So it's like the reason he had to do it because he would ask, I think it was Tiresias, because Tiresias isn't fucking all this shit. Tiresias is like the fury of the MCU, of the GCU. But like all of these warriors, these people who are trained to kill, are just waiting and waiting and waiting. And there's a lot of like very famous, very wonderful books. Like Pat Baker does one about like what happens to the women when these warriors, these men who are taught that the only way to be emotionally close to satisfy anything is through bloodshed and war. So it's also like, it's not just fun, but when it's your way of life for so long, anything else seems like a war other than what you've known. So it's also like we have to approach it with maybe a more morally gray area. I think we could give people the opinion of like, you just want to fight because it's fun. It's like, no, we want to fight because you had us fight until you didn't need us to fight anymore, and now you want us to pivot out of nowhere. And it's like the two things can be correct and held in the same hand. That way it's not exactly a black and white issue. It's a little more morally complicated, sort of like the silt, an igneous silt after a volcano eruption. If
I love your word, and I love you're like, yes. And it's a gentle layer of igneous over everything, but it works so well, and I love it. Lee.
It's because igneous is also in lava flow you get obsidian, right, which is brittle and the most fragile, which is ironic because igneous is the least fragile.
Yeah, that is.
Who knows? I don't know too much about rocks. From the one Wikipedia dive I did 5 years ago.
Check out Fleet Dietrich on Twitter for some more interesting rock facts.
More rock facts.
It's a rock fact. God, I need to get
rock
googly
is a
eyes and
genre
put it
of
on one of
music.
my rocks back here. I love that.
I think that's
also, by the way, chat, I've got everything, so I got all your words.
Skag's putting these really like peaceful, lovely words in. It's just like, no, Skag, no, that's not what we're doing.
I have a peaceful, lovely word coming up, so
I think it's yours now.
I think
it's yours.
All right, we are ready. Can I get a drum roll in chat? I want people to write brrr in any way you
Just
can.
people write brrr.
Just write brrr. I'm gonna have my rock here to really. I don't even care about rocks that much, but I have a brand now, I guess.
I'm just calling this episode Rock when I upload it to YouTube. No context. It's just gonna say Rock, one word.
It's rock.
I am
not
one
even
rock.
writer's block. It's just rock.
Rock.
Season 3, episode 4. You know what we're talking about.
Rocks. I mean, listen. They say good marketing. Can say what you mean. But for me, my next word is innocence.
Innocence.
Which I don't know. We might not pick that one. It was good a minute ago, but now I'm very hyped about everything else that's happening.
Very hyped about the rocks.
Very hyped. Very fucking hyped about the rocks.
So, what was your thought behind picking innocence here?
I really like the idea of innocence as both a negative and a positive, just like martyrdom. There's like innocence can be naive, it can be considered stupid, it could be considered annoying. Like there's an inherent lack of worldliness with innocence and isolation. But I think I also like innocence, and I think it's a positive word because it's like, do you think of how you felt as a child, like times that were easier, and there's an innocence to that, and that's what we think of better times. Is the moment of innocence. Like when I think of innocence, I think of having something to compare something to. I think of bliss. I think of it's not ignorance. Like, it's not on purpose. It just simply is the period where you are able to and start like to enjoy yourself without a feeling of weight of what's around you, which you'll get to. I think innocence also inherently has a promise of dissolving. Innocence is ephemeral, but
Yeah.
I really like that word for that reason.
Yeah, and
It's not something that can last.
Yeah, and I feel like innocence is also a it's like it can be used as like a euphemism for ignorance. Just like the whole idea of just it's like, oh, they're a child, they're innocent, they have that innocence about them, or they're a homebody, they're innocent, they don't know anything about the outside world and stuff like that. But there's also that innocent, like innocence is also something that we as a society like all the time are trying to preserve, and it's it's a fleeting thing. It's like it's not something you'll ever be able to keep. People are going to find out things eventually.
Yeah, let
But
children work in the factories again.
yeah, honestly, I mean, look at how many people. Look at these kids are playing Minecraft. They yearn for the mines. I'm just
They yearn
saying.
for the mines.
I love that meme so much.
So good.
Just like we
My
need to put them
soul's
back in the
leaving my
coal mine.
body.
Full offense
Oh,
to the
God.
Inquisition, but send the children back to the mines.
full offense to Edwardian era London.
All right.
Yeah, no, I really like Innocence.
It's an interesting one.
It's a good contrast and everything.
It is, and the nice thing is, I think it does also slot into this grimdark world we have pretty well, because like innocence implies that there is guilt. It implies that this world, for me, it's like the little spark of like, oh, this is a nice thing buried in shit.
Dread, martyrdom,
Yeah.
bayonet.
Innocence. Yeah, it's like the image of, for me, like the thought of like, if we're talking about like that churned up trench imagery we have for like this whole world right now, and just like the one little seedling sprouting from like the trampled over mud.
And then I stomp
it. Yeah, and pretty much. Well, that's the question. Does the camera pan away before some soldier crunches it, or is it just like, oh, a happy moment in all this gross? Also, by the way, that was the last submission from the chat right now for words, because I literally have filled an entire like card with your words. So I'll get out a second one if we need it for later.
Also, like, innocence, if it implies guilt, the idea of release, right? The idea of freedom from something. So if we're really leaning in, I think like ignorance is obnoxious. Ignorance is a negative connotation of it, but innocence as a status. What if we didn't have someone who is engaged in this dirty trench of a war? What if we had like a Switzerland kind of thing of like, well, Switzerland wasn't really neutral. They kept Nazi gold. I'm coming for you, Switzerland. Give me my family's gold back. But I need my family's gold back, my friends.
You can claim innocence all you want, Switzerland, but I'm coming for you.
I know, I'm out of here, Switzerland. Full offense to any Swiss who are hiding Nazi gold. But no offense to those who aren't. You're the good ones. Keep at it.
But the ones who will national treasure away into your house and steal your shit. So
I will, and I'll be the TV too. I won't be very good. I'll be the TV show version of National Treasure.
Oh God.
That's an interesting one. But what I was going to say with that is like, when you are innocent of a crime, if you are fully innocent, you're innocent. You'll never be guilty of it. So it's also like you could in the future engage in it and become guilty. But I like the idea that there are these people who, through no fault of their own, are being pulled into this. Maybe it wasn't a volcano that destroyed their civilization. Maybe it was just like they got rolled over by this war. They were just in the way. And that's why you have this split, this schism of these war people who are like, I want vengeance for my town. And then people who are like, no, we want to rebuild. We don't want any part of this. And then you have that division. And then you have sort of like, God, I'm just going to make a Lord of the Rings reference, but I don't remember because I'm a terrible fan who doesn't have a memory for fancy names. But the city that's underwater, not Atlantis, the city that drowned. That got destroyed.
I'm just gonna put this out there. I love Lord of the Rings, but the man literally needed to make a book equivalent of an index for his whole fucking universe. So you're allowed to forget shit.
It's Numenor.
Numenor.
Ah, the Numenoreans, yes.
Yeah. So it's very Numenor of like, we want to be involved with the world, but to be involved will be our undoing.
Oh wow, what does that say about the world and them? I love
right?
that. That's
Mutually
such
assured
a
destruction,
great
baby.
question.
Yeah, so these okay, so the idea that these people were actually just like
Turned over.
just fine, like they had a great society, like they
They
were
were doing great.
yeah, like almost utopian levels of like great, and then like somebody else's like turds got on their porch and like it ruined everything. So, and then they're just like, I guess we gotta adapt and evolve with the time. Everybody, men,
I
women,
like-
children, anybody that can hold a gun, come on.
Let's go. I also like the idea of martyrdom as an explanation for atrocity. Because that's something you have to consider, and that's something I do consider a lot with my family background of like, what are the stories? What's the mythology we make from terrible events? What's the family mythology and ethos that we begin to build and make sense of tragedy with storytelling? And how do we fit that in? So maybe this is like the idea of martyrdom is less about a religious order and more about putting a story upon grief. And it's like the people who died were martyrs. The people who died for a cause, even though it maybe would not have happened that way. But it's like putting a timeline, a timestamp on it, putting meaning behind it where there might not be any.
I like
Absolutely,
that.
yeah, I like that. Just like Kane said in chat, martyrdom, even if noble, will always get used by someone as a justification for atrocity. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. It's also a great way to cope. It's like, oh yeah, your people didn't die for nothing. You know, like they didn't just die for no reason.
They're
you know?
martyrs.
Yeah, they're martyrs. Absolutely. Yeah,
You should be like them. You should aspire to be like them.
and that plays upon innocence because you're not telling them actually what happened. You're not telling them the cruel tragedy of things like they died because they died. Like,
But then we have that line of innocence and ignorance of like, okay, but then there's a certain time where you can figure it out, and people are willingly unable to, don't want to put it together after a certain point. Those are the people who want to divert and like go out and use their bayonets.
just bayonets, no guns. Just like
we are a bayonet only society.
The bayonet
Stab
club.
man.
I'm triangle knife head. Triangle knife man.
That's great. Okay. I think we're down to the last round of words. I think that's Omni and then me. I think we're done.
I believe you're right. And my next word, I'm gonna sort of meld a little bit into the last one. Command. So here's my idea on this. Follow me on this. Because we're talking about the idea of like innocence and martyrdom and ignorance. And the idea that the civilization was once great and it's sort of fallen into apocalypse. What if, hear me out, what if the core of the civilization didn't? What if the civilization is fine, but the only way it's fine is by exploiting, whether through ignorance or whatever, these people who fought for them? And now you have almost a dual caste society. You have the ones that live in what's left of like the civilization, the small, like few protected, insulated cities. Then you have the abject, just insanity of those that fight the wars with these people constantly to keep them safe. So you have like, on the one hand, people back home are like, yes, our noble soldiers are out protecting our peoples, protecting our land, so we can study philosophy and make poetry and carve these lovely friezes. And meanwhile, elsewhere, I'm gonna tear this man's throat out with my teeth because I want to. And, you know, that's the noble dude we're talking about. And for me, the command side of it is whether the kings, queens, nobility, leaders, whatever, they realize the second these two societies clash, the whole thing's just going to go poof. So the command is, if you fight, you can't come back. It's an exile. So you either conquer somewhere new to live in, or you don't come home.
So they're like, yeah, okay, I like that idea. They're almost like slaves in that regard. Like,
I actually, there's a little bit of an idea, just a hair of that I got from Destiny. There's a species called the Cabal, and their whole shit is they're just invaders. And for like the first game and a half of the series, I was like, why the fuck are they so into this? I don't understand why. And then I read a little blurb, and they're like, yeah, when a Cabal army goes out to war, they either return victorious, having conquered the world, or they don't come back. They are cast out from their society to go to war. So either a legion wins or their asses don't come home. I'm like, fuck.
What if we combined it with cultivate? So it's not about actually conquering. Because I think I really like the idea with. So I'm going to bring up rock again because rock. But like we have these words, right? We have igneous, creeping sense of dread, cultivation, innocence, irregularity. it's not, I think what we're looking at is a civilization, not necessarily who's seeking to conquer. They're not in a position to gain anywhere new. People who are looking for resources, so like Mad Max style raiding parties, people who are they need something to eat. Like it's all well and good, but like their crops are ruined, the city's gone, they need to rebuild, but there are like dreamers and there are people who actually have to go out and get materials to rebuild. Like where are they going to get it from? Again, like there's really no igneous rock on a volcano. It's obsidian. So maybe that's their whole thing. They need building materials. So they have to go to these places that are already at war and become profiteers and profit from it. And it becomes more Mass Effect of like, we don't have a home. Anything we get, we need to send back to the flotilla. We need to send back home. And it becomes a way to like, you ruined us. We're going to take from you as what we are owed because you won't give it to us. And we're going to rebuild without your permission. And that's where command comes in. It's not a command of their own people. It's a command of the people around them of like, you might not have made this fair, but we are leveling the playing field. Bitch, I'm taking your chapel apart brick by brick. It's coming home. I'm going to British Empire your shit. It's coming home with me.
Your brick's mine.
You made this? 15,000 bricks later. I made this.
No,
It's
a perfect post-war grudge because we have another nation that we just made that's very similar to that. They're a lot more like aggressive, like, oh yeah, we needed your help and you didn't lend us help when we needed it, so now we're gonna come and take it from you. But these people are just like, nobody's giving us help because they're just like, oh, you were perfect before the war. Why aren't you perfect now, you big babies? So now they're just like, I'll take your shit.
New word, baby. Every single person in this fucking city is a baby. Baby vengeance!
That sounds like a terrible Flash game. I don't think I'd be able to boot in my browser with the FBI immediately flagging my PC.
That does sound like a Newgrounds Flash game.
It's the fucking, what is it? It's Gladiator, but with the Muppets.
Oh my god.
Are you not entertained, Kirby?
I find your performance inadequate. It makes that face. That face where he like sucks his mouth in.
the sock mouth.
Yeah,
yes, I love that.
Yeah. Oh man, that's perfect.
Yeah, what about you, Red? What's your final word?
Oh yeah. I'm gonna select one from the audience probably because that's usually.
Take your pick, Chief. We've got literally more lines than I have card.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I wasn't kidding.
We have a many, I think.
Does that say sunfishing?
Sundering. But
sunfishing.
I had to scribble over it like 3 to 4 times. I can see why you could see sunfishing out of there. I can see that.
But like not the sun, but like a sun, like the big dumb sunfish.
I mean, sunfishing is like literally just follow them until they kill themselves because they're not very smart.
My favorite part about sunfish is they get like half of them bitten apart and they don't even realize it's happening. They're just like floating around.
They're just all vibes. They're like koalas, but they're just always stoned.
Yeah, you know, you're really not wrong. They're like supermassive koalas with adorably weird shaped fins.
Supermassive koalas, the name of my next prog rock band.
Supermassive koalas is my supermassive black hole cover band.
I was hoping someone would make a Muse reference. Thank you.
Of course, it's my Muse cover band.
Oh god. I really liked the word.
I've seen Twilight.
Oh no. I really like the word blasphemous. I'm not sure who submitted that.
That was Skag.
Was that Skag? I was like, it's either Skag or Kane, but I really like blasphemous.
It was
like,
Skag.
Because we've been talking about like, you know, these people having this like this schism going on in their society. So what is considered blasphemous? Running away from battle when you're faced with literal death? Like, is cowardice blasphemous? Is you know, like what's considered like a crime? Because these people seem to have like a very like not like religious in like an orthodox sort of way, but like religious as in like they're tight knit and they know what's happening and they know what must be done sort of way.
I think blasphemy, because I'm gonna do a hot little take. I'm gonna spin this one in a hot little circle. The blasphemy is the creeping sense of dread. The blasphemy is when you give in to fear and you let violence take over. Violence without profit, violence without assessment and help, violence for the sake of violence. That's blasphemous. Violence to get supplies, violence to get money, violence to further the needs of the people. That's martyrdom. And that's the difference, is we have now this schism of warriors who are angry and want revenge, but that doesn't help. That's not the exciting part. That's the blasphemy.
That's a great idea for a short story. Could you imagine okay, so imagine there's a war band. They're all sick,
Picturing
tired.
it.
Yeah, picture in your mind's eye. So like there's a war band. There's a general who's like really desperate. Let's talk like Napoleon-esque desperate. They're like deep into the heart of Russia, and they didn't realize that they're unprepared for this.
Being
and they find
played by
this small
Lucy
village.
Liu. Being played by Lucy Liu. She's got a good vibe.
Absolutely. And then they're just marching into this territory. It's like snowing, and they finally meet a village. They start sacking and pillaging this village, trying to find any supplies they possibly can. They kill everybody inside. They realize that this village didn't have any supplies either. So then every single one of them has a sense of guilt. Like, did we just commit blasphemy? Should we just literally end it here? Like, we literally just killed these people for no reason. And it's just, and it's that moral complication of just like, we just did the ultimate act of blasphemy. Should we literally just end our lives and cast ourselves into the sea?
But then I think that's also blasphemy, is to die without helping, right? It's like, if there's any waste of life, I think self-harm like that would be in the vein, right? Because that's still wasteful. So maybe it would be like a blasphemy like that's met with a penitence, or we get into the idea of like performative justice. Did I do this good thing because I really meant it, or did I do this good thing because I wanted accreditation for it? So like, if they murder a whole bunch of people, they take all the stuff, they bring it home. Did they murder for the stuff they needed, or did they murder for the sake of murdering, cover it up? Is it the same thing? Is it different?
Yeah, because like that would be a so Omni and I were talking about making a game out of this where you literally you have like a character that you play like the leader of like a group of like soldiers and stuff like that, and it's like Warhammer Crusades except without all the crunchy stuff that gets in the way of like the role play.
Yeah.
So could you imagine like you're leading this warband and you are the head of this warband, and your soldiers have like a huge dip in morale because, wow, we just slaughtered people and we don't have anything to show for it. So we committed blasphemy. So so we were talking about morale being a stat. And I feel like like killing like that and without a cause would just hugely just destroy their morale to the point where they don't want to fight anymore.
But that was
like,
Vietnam. That was just Vietnam.
Absolutely, it was Vietnam.
Right?
Just
it
like
was just murdering innocent people, and it just, everything broke apart. People abandoned the military. They ran because that's hugely like, that's, I think, a huge miscalculation for a government to send someone in and expect them to be so brainwashed in nationalism that they will blindly follow. So maybe that's something to consider. And again, Cult of the Lamb has a similar mechanic of like, you can drug your entire cult and they will never get mad at you for like a whole day. You will never lose their like respect or morale. I don't remember what the stat is called especially, but like there are ways around it, but they also fuck you up to use it. Like you are now the person who this is weighing on. So maybe it's like you have your morality stat, but then you have like a psyche stat for the leader who's making them do these things.
So yeah, I think you'd also have Omni and I were talking about like specific faction things. We'd call them weirding, like just sometimes
like
often
Celtic.
unexplainable. Yeah, just like strange things that they can do to keep people in line, or like or like buff them, or blah blah blah. I feel like that's
just some weird edge that's just not normal.
Yeah. So I feel like the trade-off here would be you could do something like that. You know, like you could somehow indoctrinate them, but that would weigh heavy like upon your stat, because like you have your own sanity stats and stuff like that as well.
Oh, like Call of Cthulhu, so like using power would diminish. That's cool. I like that. I want to know more, but I know we're on a stream. I don't want to deviate from your plans.
No. I mean, we, you know, like Omni and I are like in the birthing process of this. Like, you know, we're in our earliest stages of just like, what is this going to look like? But we know one thing for
the last stage of it, right?
No.
Okay, we're in the contraction phase. We're
in a humanity aspect.
Okay,
the birthing part.
I'm gonna blame.
We're just jading. Okay.
I'm going to blame the American education system for that one.
Oh my god.
We're in the we're in the okay. Well, let's just use gamer terms. Alpha. We're in the alpha stages.
We're in conception.
We're in blue sky phase. We're
in blue velvet. We're in blue velvet.
Damn it.
Project Blue Velvet is a go. Oh boy. But I blame the American educational system for everything. Me too, kid. Did you know the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell? But
that was my kill switch.
That's your fucking sleeper agent code to set you off.
Oh god.
But no, I
That's
like
my
the
Manchurian candidate.
There you go. So yeah, no, the idea of just like having an army and like one of these guys is like they're weird is their flaws. It's just like what does this particular group of people, because like we're talking about an entire nation's worth of people, so they're gonna have different views on everything. It's like the different types of like Christianity, everybody has their own different views. I mean, different types of the same religion. And it's like, so like what upon creating this group you'd be like, okay, what are these, what things do these guys consider blasphemous? And you always have that kind of constant of violence with no gain is the ultimate blasphemy. So it's just like, what do you, where do you go from there? And then like they have other things, just like, oh, salting fields and like destroying people's houses and stuff like that. Like destroying people's homes is not, that's off limits. All these sorts of things. Taking prisoners could be like, oh yeah, we don't take prisoners. Like, so that's something that we don't do. That's blasphemy, because if you take prisoners and the prisoners start talking to your people and being like, we're actually innocent and your leader is a psychopath, you're gonna have that issue. It's just like they're gonna lose morale, they're gonna turn on you, and that sort of thing. So in this game, there's always that threat of being having a mutiny, as it were, like people just rebelling against you and being like, you're a psycho and we need to figure things out. So it's cruel, and it's real, and people are going to be made examples of in this setting, especially because it's just like, you know.
There's a game called Blood Feud, about toxic masculinity. You portray men struggling to uphold their own honor, and in the end, you see what the struggle costs you. You might be interested in looking at that, because I think the themes that you're looking at do play in a lot with like toxic masculinity, which is a lot of what war really
It stems from
does.
toxic masculinity. Like all
Exactly.
war stems from that.
It's very, and there's like a lot to it, but I think you guys would be very interested in taking a look at it. It's got some really good mechanics. It's very role play heavy, so I think you might. I just think like with what you're saying, this is on a smaller scale, so it's more in the realm of like a TV show with characters, but it might relate to what you're thinking. Could be a really good resource
So this is called Blood
in
Feud?
terms of, yeah. It's called Blood Feud. It's by it was one of last year's Zine Quest makes. It's by who's it by? That's gonna crush me. Alf and Amos, Pearson and Malmberg, I think. But it's a beautiful game. I really think everybody should honestly play it. It's pretty like revelatory. It sort of is Bluebeard's Bride for men.
Hmm.
Oh, okay.
So dealing with the horrors of what masculinity does to you. And I think that, I don't know, like the idea of a horror like that, it's on a smaller, more like mental scale and more personal scale. So it's not quite what you're doing, but it could at least inform.
There is going to be a personal scale, and that'll be like,
Yeah.
you as a commander. So yeah, that's perfect. I'll definitely be, Ani and I both definitely be looking into that. The whole idea of,
Fantastic.
I like, I know there's all these grognards are always about like, it's about escapism and like getting away from that, but it's just like I think one of the biggest parts of escapism is like doing things and like helping cope with the stuff that you've suffered through in the first place. So the whole idea of just like, as Omni and I, who are both male and we're raised male, and we're both cis, we've dealt with that nonstop. Like the whole idea of like toxic masculinity, it's just like, oh, you're not a man if you do this, or you're not a man, you need to man up and do that. So the whole idea of just like confronting these tropes and stuff like that, and realizing that masculinity bullshit, it's all just a facade, and like that's not who anybody is on the inside, unless they really are indoctrinated into it. Yeah, I think that's a great thing to explore. I think it's especially now with like the rise and the alt-right bullshit nowadays, like it's getting pretty scary. You got these psychopaths like Jordan Peterson, who were probably bullied in school, and he thought, okay, in response to getting bullied in school, I'm going to man up. It's just like, no. But I could go on about those psychopaths that are alt-right, but it's all that indoctrination. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, they're not really psychopaths. They're entrepreneurs, right? They're making money from
Yeah,
it.
they know what they're doing. Yeah, I shouldn't say they're out of their mind. They know exactly what they're doing.
But I think like as designers and anybody who reads this, who builds a world, you have to remember we're playing a power fantasy. Every game, from Monopoly to Life to these things, are fantasies. They're power fantasies about gaining power, using power. So when you design something, when you write something, the biggest question you need to ask yourself, whose power fantasy is this? and what rules does it play by? So that whenever I design something, I always ask that. With Vampire the Masquerade, especially, whose fantasy is this? Who are the people who are powerful? And it
Right.
makes me question like the world that's built of like, okay, if I'm going to make a coterie, right? And I'm just using vampire because it's what I'm kind of working on right now for an
Sure.
actual play. Who's in charge? Who are the people who are most held up in this system? What makes people feel powerful, and who gets control over that power? In D&D, it's the same thing. Who are the powerful? Who are not? I mean, that's why, and I'm gonna touch very briefly on it. It's not something I want to super go into, but like, Assault as a storyline. Whose power fantasy is it really? Who are you disempowering by fulfilling a fantasy? And I think that's something that we have a responsibility as people who put things into public content to think about. And that's my mission throughout every game I design, everything I touch. Am I disempowering someone to empower maybe something I shouldn't be empowering?
That's an incredibly poignant thing. And
Yeah,
I'm glad you
absolutely.
brought that forward. So often with like game design or just design generally, it's something that can get away from you. So you can just like you can get enamored with the context of like creating things. But really you do have to check yourself occasionally and go, am I creating responsibly? Am I making something that not only should I feel proud of when it sees the light of day, but that at very least doesn't actively hurt people in the same way that a GM would, make sure that if there's any players at their table, their players are safe or comfortable or well within the bounds of what they find something they would enjoy. Creating something that is inherently damaging is likewise dangerous. I think it's an important thing.
Can I address something in the chat that just came up?
Yeah, you're talking about Kane's
So-
message?
Kane, I want to talk to you about Blades in the Dark. Because that's exactly the same thing.
I love
Yeah,
Blades in the
that's
Dark.
right next to me. I fucking love Blades in the Dark. So,
Me
Kane,
too.
you bring up
Love
an
it.
interesting point that I think actually, you say you're being the devil's advocate, but I think we're in agreement. The idea of being the underdog is an empowerment story. You may be disempowered in the beginning, but like Blades in the Dark and Thief, you are improving. You are getting more powerful. You are running. There's a difference between risk, right, and empowerment. And empowerment are also the mechanics of leveling up, of gaining more ability. I think you're completely right in that like games disempower, but I think you're disempowering the status of the characters, not necessarily the players themselves. And
Yeah.
on a mechanics level, you're actually seeing a reverse where you are able to play disempowerment in a safe environment that actually empowers you. So I do think that's an excellent point that you bring up of like, what's the difference? And I think it's something you feel like in comedy, you don't want to punch down, you want to punch up. You
Mhm.
know when you're punching down, right? It's the reason why, a lot of comedians, like people aren't, if you're not punching up, it's not usually very funny. It's just kind of mean. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the evocation of it is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, the whole idea of punching up, I do that a lot in my game. So voice crack, with have some water real quick, but I do that
Get
a
it
lot.
up.
in things I
Everyone
do.
have some water.
Hydrate, yeah.
Hydrate, don't die.
But that's something I cover a lot in my writing. I'm in the process of editing a book right now, and I wrote another book last year.
So you can avoid editing the book.
No, I'm editing the book bit by bit. I'm doing it very slowly. I'm editing 10 pages a day because it takes so long and it drains me. But both of the books, they're fantasies. They're fantasy stories, yes, but they're stories told from the perspective of people that don't have a lot of power. They're just like regular ass people, like folks in the chat that have read my book, Olva, The Art of Lights. It's mostly told from the perspective of a young woman who's a squire and like this group of knights that are their whole job is to go outside and make sure threats don't come inside of their country. And their whole duty is like sometimes they will never see the inside of their home country again, but to die in service to it is an honor. So she's having the issue of like understanding these fantasies because she's been told these romanticized versions of what her mentors have done over the years. Like, oh yeah, I remember when Sir Yondash, he marched himself right up to the capital and absolutely slaughtered all these blasphemers and misbelievers that were summoning cult magic and they're doing all this stuff. And she's like, wow, that's amazing. I want to do something like that someday. I want to protect my country like that. And then she's eyewitness to it. And then she actually sees what happens. She saw this guy go on a rampage and start slaughtering people on the street. And she starts having this realization that, are we really the good guys? Like, are all this romanticized bullshit?
Are we the baddies?
Are we the baddies?
Are we the
bad
baddies?
guys? No, but that's exactly the story. She's just like, we are not the good guys. Like, we are not doing anything good. We are going to other people's homes and destroying them. So like her whole thing is like, it's a coming of age story, sure, but like it's also the idea that she wants to disempower this because she's seen the local people, they're friendly, but as soon as they find out what she is, they turn sour because they know what these Ardalites are capable of. They know what they've done. They've done horrible things. They've raised entire villages because they're sacrilege, you know, stuff like that. And it's the whole idea of just it's a fantastical commentary on crusade life, and the whole idea is that yeah, she's like, I need to start. We're punching down. That's literally all we're doing. Is just
literally punching people into the dirt.
literally, yeah,
punching
just
down.
killing citizens.
They're so short, punching straight down.
Just punch right in the dirt. Oh man, that's like Pee Wee League baseball type shit. Just getting mad and like kicking the dirt.
Well,
But,
that
oh my
reminds me of
God.
like, well, one, Poppy Wars always comes to mind when someone's like, the idealization of war versus the reality. Poppy Wars
Yep.
all day fucking broke me. What a book. But then the Green Knight, right? I know it recently came out as a
I
movie, and it
still need to watch it.
does a really good job. Have you read the old anonymous story?
The original, I don't.
The old Anon.
If I have, it was in high school, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. So
I definitely would recommend, as you work on this, to reread it because it's about chivalry and the sort of
Yes.
the dissonance of chivalry, right?
Okay.
Because
Yes, I have a friend who actually. So my friend, this really brilliant guy. He actually went to the UK and he became an Arthurian scholar. He was an English major, doctorate. All his shit is bent around Arthurian lore and the disseminating of it. So he's doing work with documents that are hundreds of years old, and he has to be very careful with them. And his favorite story is the Green Knight, and he could not shut up about it. And I loved that story. I'm so glad he told me like a million times. But I just love the idea of just like, yeah, no. So here's this impossible task. You can sure. It seems easy, but the code of chivalry is if you fail, I get to kill you. And
well, the entire story is about the dissonance of self and chivalry, and it's about because it's also like what Man of La Mancha is about. It's Don Quixote. Excuse me. I know the musical better than the book.
I mean, honestly, it's pretty close.
It's pretty fucking good. I keep shaking my camera because I'm like moving so much. But so sorry, I'm like earthquakes
you're
over in
fine.
Brooklyn. But the idea of chivalry as an idea to uphold, and then the idea of chivalry is you can never actually complete the code of chivalry. It's never done. You will never actually be able to achieve it. It's impossible. Chivalry itself is impossible because the idea of chivalry is you act to a perfect code. We are imperfect as humans. The Green Knight is not just about a task. It is about the impossibility of chivalry, and it's about the internal dissonance of a goal versus an ideal. And I think that for your book specifically, it sounds like that's very much, if you're doing Crusades as well, what you're dealing with of this code. And like that sort of music, like a lot, but I'm vibing of that, like the idea of dissonance in a story, of personal to global or worldly. The idea of macro versus micro is always very interesting to me as a storyteller of ego, things that are dissonant in a very specific way. I think is very compelling and powerful, especially right now in my life. Stories evolve and change as we get older. So it's the Green Knight I read it a long time ago too, but it's captivated me in a pretty new way recently in terms of the futility of trying and why it's the most important thing to try, even if it's futile.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a really see, I write all these things, and I'm one of those assholes that just I don't do anywhere near enough reading as a writer. I'm not one of those guys that's like, oh, you need to read endless books to be a good writer, but I think I think it is important to read and see how other people have told a story similar to mine. That Green Knight's definitely one I need to read now. The whole idea of just like the whole idea of like you're expected to follow a code to the T, but just like what happens when you can't? Like that's a really great concept, and
it's really cool.
Tying it all back in, digressing. Yeah, it's like what
Bring us back, Red.
do? Yeah. So like
Bring us back.
So what do these guys do? You know, like what do these? They just killed a bunch of people, thinking that they were going to get supplies, and you know, there's going to be they would survive, and they would move further towards the capital of the place they're trying to sack and pillage to take their shit. And then it's just like, oh, we killed them for no reason. So like, what do we do now? Like we
You have to cultivate innocence. You have to
cultivate innocence.
innocence.
So
You have
good.
to. You have to. It's like quests of old. You have to leave in order to find the Holy Grail, in order to cultivate that innocence again in yourself, to know what it is to kill for need versus to kill for the sake of it. So it's like you are exiled, but you always have the chance to sort of come back once you have completed an impossible task, maybe to regain innocence. And it becomes this idea of like you can either give in to the excess of the world, the excess of war, or you can try and fail to go back to how you were before you knew.
This is a great idea for a short story. I'm just saying, like,
Listen, I came in hoping for some short story ideas. I'm tired of the one I'm working on about a group of teenage girl unicorn hunters. So
I feel like this is also a like mechanically speaking. I'm thinking about it in terms of the game. I tend to like when you brought up the whole like who's this empowering, how are you empowering and disempowering others to do it. And my thought was, I mean, for me, the obvious and probably the two obvious. There's many I'm sure there's many levels of this to dig into, but like for me, the idea of this game, who it's empowering as an individual, what's the fantasy? The fantasy is like in many settings in many games, it's mattering. You're a general in this setting. You command a regiment in a war. You are capable of changing this thing that's happening for the worse or the better. And even though you can't make the world necessarily better on a macro scale, your interventions might be better on the minimal scale, whether that's for your people back home, whether that's for you and your personal sense of honor or dignity, whatever you want to bring to this. It's your chance to literally make a system of power and then exert it. And unfortunately, that would be people who are disempowering is the people in war who you are exerting authority over. You are, in this setting, playing a commander of a military that is inherently dehumanizing to those below you. That is the structure of power in the military is you have people who will die and people who will tell them to die. And unfortunately, the structure of that demands both sides of those be okay with that. And so for me, mechanically speaking, we talk about the idea of like this army marching on a place. Sure, they're about to get resources. Sure, they're going to get all this stuff. They murder everyone. They're like, oh, there's nothing. Wait, there's nothing. We did this for no reason. Mechanically, my thought is maybe this army has a mechanic around it where they suffer, like prior to a battle, they can get enhanced stats or what have you. They basically have like a buff they get to their morale, and the morale is directly impacted by their pillaging. So the more they pillage as a campaign goes on, as the game goes on, the higher their morale becomes, the more they can shrug off things that a normal army would be like, that's messed up. But these guys, buoyed up by their purpose, by this naivete that they're doing this for their people, they're doing this for this righteous cause.
I had a really great idea.
And then it falls flat, and then they suffer huge debuffs on the other side of it.
I had a really great idea.
I have an idea too. You go first.
So I was thinking the commanders of these like regiments would not be like called commanders, captains. They'd be called tally men, or tally people, or whatever we want to call them.
I like that.
And their whole task would be to not just assure that you're led to victory, but they wear like sort of a like a scroll around their neck. And for each and every person that is killed, including people in like that they're fighting, they mark down their name. So like the idea is they're constantly bearing that weight, so that they know what they're doing. They mark down the people that they killed. They're called tally people, or a tallier. Tallier would be a great name for a leader of a group, tallier. And their whole task would be, yeah, you're leading a regiment, but you also need to remember that all of these people are people at the end of the day. They are not just pawns to be thrown away. So these people may do cruel things, but they're not apathetic to everybody.
Tally master.
Literally
going with the idea of like a quartermaster. It's
yeah,
like
I want to use genderless terms. So tally man, yeah, let's just go with tally master, because there is, a lot of emphasis on breaking beyond gender in this. Like, I mean, our last civilization is like these people would, you know, like when they do these fantastically great deeds, they're no longer considered human. They're like this transhuman thing. They're no longer male nor female. They are just they. And we really liked with Ajax, like we made a really cool culture that's just like, man, this feels awesome. Like, and then people love to be in it. But I also want to keep that throughout. That gender, sex, whatever you know, that none of that matters. It's about
Yeah.
what you choose to do. You know.
Oh, I would, so just really quick, I think
Mhm.
like for some people it matters very much, right? Like a
Yeah.
trans woman or women. And I think one of those things of like when gender is I think so in my worlds, how I handle gender is very much like when you are given the option and you can change whenever you want. You can call yourself whatever you want every time. It's a new, you have a party pretty much every time. Some people love the party, so they change their pronouns, their genders with the wind. Some of them are like, no, I love this, I want this. I do a like almost a remarriage to myself every year on my birthday, my naming day kind of thing.
Ooh.
So that's how I handle gender in my stories. I make it a celebration versus a decision because I think, you know, people are changing, ever changing, right? But
Right.
so I would actually posit like, and again, I'm gonna say whose power fantasy is it? Because to me, to murder, to play this game, I feel like it is good for a certain kind of person, but I don't think I would play that kind of game. And I wonder, maybe it's because it's too inside of the war. Wolfgang Bauer has a really good essay in one of the Cobalt Guide Game Master, Game Designer books, where he says a good game is something you would want to play, right? But that makes
Right.
it niche, that makes it indie. A great designer can like blow it out and make it so universal. And that's why people love D&D. You can be anyone within this cozy world. So why not take it a step further out? So you're a commander of a thing, but we already said like people are exiled. These people are trying to find their purpose, they have a goal to recapture innocence. They don't belong to a side. They
Mhm.
always have to do what they are trying to figure out what's right to return to this home. So they
Right.
have the option to join up with a side. They have an option to do this. And you crack open the world a little more by making them more mercenary than division. And so you have this commander who led their men to the brink, who led their people. This I like the idea of a talier, like a chevalier, like a talier,
Oh,
like who
yeah.
has to
Ooh, I
go
like that.
in and
Hmm.
lead these people because they believe that this person knows how to get them home, right? It's very much the Odyssey. They're following him because only he can get them home. But what happens
Hmm.
when even the commander doesn't know how to get home and they have to fake it? So it's not only like they're
Right.
leading their men into battle, they're leading these people into an unknown and they have to make a decision. They are the only one who can, or else it's going to be mutiny. So I think maybe if you center it more in a more hub area, in a more central way, you have that ability for the players in a game mechanic specific to go down any of these beautiful rungs that you are designing for these seasons and choose where they want to go and have a little more agency that way.
Hmm. We do have some segments of this world that are designed to be sort of like meeting places for the different cultures.
Mhm.
So, as an example, in one of the first ones we did, we have this idea of certain city states on the ports just they don't participate in the war. They are truly a neutral ground. Of
Mhm.
course, it's a pay
Right.
for play kind of thing. So you're going to a port city, they're going to demand you trade. But when you go there, you lower your flags of you fly your national flag, whatever it is, or your regimental flags. You go in there basically just don't bring any of your weird in. Don't bring any of the things that would clearly denote you as like if your regiment rides dinosaurs that shriek out incandescent tongues of fire. Maybe leave those at the door
Okay.
because it'd be very hard to separate that imagery from who you are.
Yeah, the
But yeah, the
Bacchanali torch.
Bacchanali. But while you're there, you could leave, you can join the Bacchanali regiments, you can meet with other commanders, and it's this very neutral ground. And I feel like this would be the kind of place where this group we're talking about, like especially if we're talking about the ability to like join other regiments where they would go. Like for that kind of thing.
It
Yeah.
makes me think of Civ, right? Where you have all these city states and eventually they fall to a beast that gets too big. So that
Yeah.
also could be an ever-present threat of like you have people have to be there. Like you have to keep your emissaries in a city state or else too many of the other people's emissaries will enter and you will lose that state. What happens when that state falls when everybody's inside? So I think you also have an
Right.
added point of tension there.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And since I like the idea of broadening the system, my concept, I haven't communicated it very well, but because I have all sorts going on up in this weird head of mine. But the idea is you're not just like a military leader. You're not one of those. You're not like a Warhammer commissar. You can be whatever
Right.
you want. You're just leading a group of people, and one of the
Got
things
it.
yeah,
Okay.
one of the
Yeah.
things I conveyed in the first episode to Omni, when him and I were just talking about shooting the shit about the game itself, is you could be a religious leader
Mhm.
that has an entire pacifist army. They're
Love a
literally
cult.
going around, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, literal cult, and it'd be like Civilization. You could get a religious victory. There's like different types of like victories and things that you can achieve through being a character. So you could be a mercenary leader that, yeah, we're just going to sell our swords to the highest bidder, and we're going to go fight wars, and we're going to pay and then the story would be, okay, so what happens when the enemy side that you're fighting offers you more money? Are you
Right.
are you going to
Yeah.
develop a reputation for being loyal no matter how much money you're given, or are you going to develop a reputation for being turncoats, like always
there-
ready to drop?
Is there a reputation meter?
There will be, I feel.
I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Hell yeah!
Absolutely.
I feel like it's going to
Like-
be. I feel like it'll function a lot like the way like social trees work in Vampire. The whole idea of
Yeah.
like you know this person through this person, and then this person knows this person, so like things go up the rung of command and stuff like that. And that's where, at the very top, you'd have like a reputation, and you get points for being positive in reputation. You get points for being negative. So like bit like
Sims.
what's that?
Like The Sims.
Yeah, like The Sims or like Fallout, you know, and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I mean, how there could be a karmic system. You could be like, oh, if you're doing all, I mean, that would be a little too on the nose, I feel, because that one's a little black and white. But I like things being Fable. Yeah, Fable's a great example too. Yeah, absolutely. But no, I like the idea of just like you're developing reputations, you're making enemies, you're making friends. But here's the thing: if you make friends with somebody and you're friends with somebody else already, what if that friend is an enemy of the friend that you currently already have, and then you're losing reputation? Everything you do, no matter what it is, could have a consequence.
That's
Like,
Dragon Age, baby.
Yeah, basically.
sure,
That is
absolutely.
100%.
Dragon Age.
100%.
I love
That's
that.
what I thought of. That when we were talking about this, the
Inquisition.
image in my head was it was literally the board from Dragon Age Inquisition, where it's just like, okay, I'm now gathering forces, I'm gathering resources, I'm trying to impact this world. And there's different ways of doing it, like Red said. You can be religious, you can be military. The obvious immediate thought to me is military, because how often do we think about like combat as a mechanic? And so we're like, okay, well, if
you could
combat is
literally
handled
be
on like a larger scale. You can be diplomatic.
You could
Like-
be a literal Moses that's just trying to lead their people away from a
Yeah.
hostile place and find a new home. Like you could do whatever you want. It's just where there's probably going to be like
Yeah.
different forms of gameplay and stuff like that. It's just and
Okay.
and then you're confronted with choices that are like, okay, so my people are pacifists, they don't want to fight, but if they don't fight, they will die. So like, where do we go
And
from
that's
there?
where multiple players can work together. You could have
Yeah.
multiple regiments or multiple groups working together, where you might have military regiments providing security. You might have a diplomatic regiment that's there just go like, hey, maybe we don't have to fight at all this time. Maybe I can talk with the other people we're dealing with, and we can just go and not kill people today. And you might have religious groups that might be there for another purpose entirely, or mercantile groups. There's many different ways to flavor this, but ultimately it is, like Red said, you're the leader of a group. And that group
Leader of the
is
pack.
pretty much, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the background is this world that's very quickly splintering into a new war, just an everywhere kind of deal.
You know, we've been going for an hour, a little over an hour and a half, and we haven't even selected the words for the world building. This has been great. I don't care. I mean, like, hey, I just like don't care about the rules. We're having a great time. We're having a great time. So
Good
I think we
chat.
should get to that. I think we should get to that part though.
Yes, it's
I
fair.
think that's a good idea.
Can I request a brief bio break to refill my juice and go to the bathroom?
Yeah, sure. 5 to 10
Oh,
minute
his
break.
juice.
I need
I
just
like
toast.
my apple juice.
I need my
okay? Leave me
apple
alone.
juice.
Leave me alone. I don't like soda. That's my thing. I'll see
All right,
you guys
folks.
soon.
Stick around. We'll be back in 5 to 10 minutes. Welcome back, everybody, to Writer's Block. We had to get back as soon as possible because cakesters need to be consumed.
I'm down to one Cakester, and I opened this maybe 5 minutes ago. I gotta eat this on stream. Someone paid me a lot of money to. No, can you imagine if someone was like, "I heard you going on Red Stream. Let me pay you like $1 million to slowly eat something."
I'd be actually incredibly flattered. I don't know if I'd be flattered or I'd ask for like royalties.
Nah, I mean it's not your mouth or your Oreo Cakester.
I have Oreos in my fridge over there. Does that count?
Or the cake? Why do you have Oreos in your fridge?
Because they taste better cold.
You're wrong. You're just wrong.
No, they're good. Posture check. Thank you. Easiest $1 million. Absolutely.
It's like every time someone's like, "Oh, have you ever thought about feet pics?" Not because it's just like a topic of conversation that like comes up of like I need money. I recently actually got a job this morning. I signed the contract, which is super cool, but I got laid off in November. And I was complaining. I was like, I don't really have a way to make money. You know, like my TTRPGs aren't selling super well just because it's for systems that are kind of like weird. And my friend's like, you should sell your feet. And I was like, no, these feet are janky. And my friend looked me in the eye, was like, grabbed my cheek and was like, those you could charge more for. And I was like, I hate this. I hate that you know that. I hate that you know that so much. What are you not telling me? And I was really expecting them to be like, do you want to be a star, kid? Do you want to be a star?
Like $20,000 a day.
To make you a star.
Oh, God.
Never thought about selling feet pics, because boy, oh boy, do I have some weird feet. But
hey, there's a market for it.
I
got
will
like
not
duck
comment.
Not with that attitude. Stop. Okay, anyway, let's digress. Enough about feet. Feet isn't one of our words. Red has webbed toes, kinda. But let's make swim better. So,
are you from Waterworld? What the fuck?
That tragedy of a movie.
Oh my god.
Okay, so one of the best films ever made. So let's see here. Smile, I guess. So, okay, so each of us are gonna pick 2 words and narrow it down. Honestly, Fleet, the way the show went in the first hour and a half, I was like, I'm gonna change the rules for the show because I was just like, I really like the idea. Just like we're just having conversations based upon one word at a time. But for now,
fun.
Yeah, it is kind of fun. No, you're.
I
totally
live
fine.
to break a game.
That's totally fun. This is it. I mean, this is like
breaker.
do whatever the fuck you want. I mean, if we're as long as we're world building, that's what it is. That's what the show's about. All about building worlds. So.
Word.
Right. So what's next?
You are going to pick 2 words from the list that you like the most, and then we will focus on those for the preceding part of the show.
Oh, that's a lot of words.
We usually go like one at a time in a row. So like you pick a word you really, really like, and then the next person picks a word they really, really like. And by the time we're done, we'll have narrowed this down to vaguely 6 words. And don't worry, we usually end up using all of them anyway.
Yep.
I'm gonna be real. I really like Martyrdom. I think we had a lot of cool discussion around it. So I'm gonna say I'd like to keep Martyrdom.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Yeah, that one really, of all of them, that one pops to me.
Me too. It just makes it made me think the hardest about everything going on with what we were talking about world building wise. So yeah, Martyrdom.
Yeah. God bless. It made you think. God bless.
Yeah, you know what? Not a lot goes on up here anymore, so anything I can get.
I was wondering what that burning smell was.
The hamsters
smells like rubber. Who's burning tires? Holy shit. All right, Avni, you want to pick your first word, boss?
Oh man, I'm gonna go with irregulars. I really liked the word irregulars.
Nice. Ajax asking, can you recap how this works? Absolutely. So each of us came with 3 words, and we or I came with 2, and then blah blah blah. Anyway, 3 words. So there's 9 here. Each of us are picking 2 words here to focus on for the world building process, and that's pretty much how it works from here on. And we just incorporate these words into our thought process while we're working. So.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So you got irregulars. It is
yeah,
my
irregulars.
Oh, goody.
Yeah.
Goody, goody.
Fucking turn.
Okay.
You told me how old you are, and now I think I can yell at you.
That's fine. Honestly, people yell at me anyway. People are like, "Aren't you like 40?" I'm like, but no, nobody said I'm not old.
Maybe if you weren't 1,000 yards from the camera, they wouldn't think that. You're so far from
Damn.
the camera.
It's because this camera's fisheye lens. I don't know. It's so weird how far
You
away
look
it
like
is.
you're in a
Fleet is-
horror movie. I feel like
Fleet
the
is
door
coming
behind
for
you's
your
gonna
wig.
open.
Swing open, and there's just like
It's
this
gonna be like
a weird falcon person just gonna step
a
in,
weird,
screeching at me.
truly Birdman. Truly
It's an
Birdman
actual
just
Birdman.
walks in.
We're not gonna get anything done on this show. Red. I think Dread will be my first pick.
Dread's a good
Are
one.
we all picking our own words?
Oh, I didn't come up with Dread.
You know, Dread was mine. I
Dread
picked
was
Reds
mine.
and regulars.
Okay.
You can pick
so-
your own. You can pick your own. I'll give you shit for it, but you can pick your own words.
I already did.
That's fair. That's all right. I mean, on occasion we have narcissist on the show, but you can't do anything about that.
Listen, I'm not a
That happens.
narcissist unless I'm proud of it.
Okay.
No, Red was talking about me, unfortunately.
Omni's the biggest narcissist I know.
I was really
According-
into Blasphemous. I loved
am
that
too.
dichotomy. I was really into that. So yeah, I'm gonna pick Blasphemous for my other word.
That was a
That
good
Martyrdom
one.
and Blasphemous as a pairing are very cool. I liked what we were talking about. I like that a lot.
Me too.
Hmm.
Let's see. Right here.
So you have Martyrdom,
Yeah, no,
Dread.
I like Blasphemous. You ever play the game Blasphemous?
What is that?
It's
Tell me
a
more.
Metroidvania game.
Tell me less.
Okay. No, all right, I get it.
I do
Now
love
that's what
it.
it is.
I'm not good at Metroidvania. So what
I'm not
happens
either.
to Blasphemous? What is that?
So the setting is really cool and inspiring. It's like a really high fantastical take on Spanish Catholicism. So like there's some really bizarre shit happening nonstop. Yeah, Catholic Dark
Wait.
Souls.
Is it the one with the moon people?
The moon people.
She's like a main character, and they're like the guy made them, and like I think I have Blasphemous actually.
Blasphemous is like you're playing as a little dude with he has like a cone shaped helmet. It's like a spike helmet, and he like fills it with
No,
blood.
I've
and puts
never
it on his
played
head.
Blasphemous. I'm thinking of Moon something. There's a really
Moon
beautiful
people.
one that's out. That's very like reminds me of Claymore, that old anime, the old manga, I should say. I don't know if it's anime, but I really like that one. It
Maybe
was
somebody
on
in chat
sale.
knows what you're talking about.
I don't know. Who knows what I'm talking about? I don't. It's not just Bloodborne.
Is it just Bloodborne? Kind of. Bloodborne's more like daily life in London.
Blood Bowl, mate.
Hi,
It's
mate.
me. Hey, Gov. It's me, Bloodborne. Clean your chimney. I've got the typhoid, governor.
And then your entire left side becomes like a 30-story monster with a dragon head for a hand.
Oi,
and you clean the
governor.
chimney. Yeah, but you
Sounds
can't
like
take off
hell
the
like on
accent.
drugs. I use the cone helmets in all my art. Hell yeah.
Cone helmets are awesome.
It's your
More cone
Bloodborne
head,
helmet.
please.
It's your turn.
I know.
Yeah, you baffling, you bumbling idiot.
Disappear
He used
now.
2 B words in a
Um,
row. Watch the fuck out.
I am gonna go with Igneous because
Rock.
you used that rock so much, so well, in
Yeah,
so
I'll-
many uniquely descriptive ways. I
Rock,
would be performing a crime to remove it from your use. So I rock.
Rock.
It's a beautiful.
one day I'm
rock.
gonna do a stream of the weirdest things in my house because there's some strange objects. Object do art. I have a long Furby in the back. See if you can
Yes,
find
do you
it
really?
at home. I do.
I used to post those all the time. People were like, please stop posting these.
So the fun fact about the long Furby, one, his name is Crit Lord. He has a D20 on a collar. The second is he has reversible sequins on his belly, so you can reverse it and he turns different colors. The third is he's made out of the Broadway costume piece for Anne Boleyn on 6. So he's made out of Broadway costumes.
I love him.
He's
My
a
God.
menace.
I love
What a
cursed
weird
Furby.
pedigree. And
I
it's
know,
so
he's like
cool.
it's a fucking purebred long Furby. That's like that's everyone else is a fucking mutt. I have a purebred.
I did not expect to hear those words in the same sentence today. Purebred, long, Furby, not furry.
Anyway.
Oh God, I don't want that audience. No offense.
I think everyone you know what to do.
Oh God. My Twitter DMs will be closed indefinitely. I shall not say why. Okay, so I think I'm the last pick here.
That's
You
gonna
are.
get rocks off.
See, this is why I had to give you igneous. I had to give you it, and there's no argument I could ever make that could allow me to deny that to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I usually do this. Chat. Does somebody in chat? One of you guys want to see a specific word from the list? Type whatever word you would like to see. Whoever gets it first is going to be the word we do. How's that?
Yeah. Well, I think we're on a little bit of a lag.
Oh, I know. I'm just waiting. Very patient.
Yeah.
I think they're on a lag. You're
more
so
for you.
impatient.
Innocence. That's the first one. Pyro Knight.
Innocence. I got all three of my words in.
I like innocence.
You did.
And
It's
I
the
got
age of. And honestly, the most important one was the rock one. Because we had to maintain the integrity of this episode. We can't lie to the people.
we must have our rocks.
It rocks. Cool.
Okay, we have all of our words. And now from
Yeah.
here, we shall put something together with this. So we just so any of these words that immediately jump out to you, if you want to combine it with another word and like start running with something world building wise, we've actually done quite a bit of world building already. Just like with how these people are functioning. But if you want to just take a word or two or three and run with it, by all means.
So I'd like to go back to the rocks, and so this is not a meme. This is
Let me go back to the
I'm
rocks.
being serious here.
I want a super cut of every
So,
single time we say the word rock in this.
Yeah, can we get like one of those things where it's just like writer's block, but it's only when they say rock.
It
then
gets
at the
faster
very end,
every
they
time
also-
they say rock.
Be over in 5 minutes.
And like at the very end, like within like a second or two from the final clip, like they also insert like just a single frame from over the garden wall with rock fact, just to keep people on their toes.
Keep
So-
motherfuckers guessing.
I liked the idea. We have like their culture. Well, it seems like we have a cultural basis for this, like this grouping, this origin for whatever regimental force / diplomatic force / whatever. I'm just gonna use regiment for convenience, but this could be anything: a diplomatic regiment, a mercantile regiment. It's a group of people organized around a task with a leader. So I'm gonna go with that for now.
Yeah, that's fine.
So since we've got that, how do we want to bake the igneous into this? Because while there is a lot we can do with like the metaphor of it, this is also lava rock. Like if we can't work some weird effect out of this, I will be disappointed in us, Red. So I put this on the table, lava rock. What we do to make weird effect for these people to use for different things.
I think one, we're making an assumption about leadership and what qualifies the central force, the central power of this place. We're assuming it's military might, which I'm not so certain it is.
I don't
The
think so
idea,
either.
so I think we're making a strong assumption that it's very war oriented, and I'm not sure anything in this really makes me feel that the central ideology is going to be around the most valuable people. The leaders of a society are war based. What I'm thinking is, especially if we're talking about igneous rock, which is the hardest rock, it's magma, it's of fire. The leaders are going to be people either who have been through something and survived, so great areas of trauma, so literally hardened by the fire, are people who can either make fire or are people who if we're thinking like igneous is of fire, I'm looking at the igneous rocks really quick. I'm just looking at it. Rhyolite and Samaic. Oof, I don't understand. Go on to the Wikipedia page that I read 5 years ago.
And escape it. There'll soon be an avalanche.
Really? There's something called intrusive, and I'm like, same. So
Intrusive rock?
intrusive rock makes up the majority of igneous rock and are formed from magma that cools and solidifies. So I think we need to understand, like, if we are doing something around a volcano, if we are doing something around the idea of something that fired up, I'm thinking like a forge master is people who can make something of the fire, people who can shape the fire. So like Maybe it's they live closer to a beach, so it's people who could make stained glass, people who can make makers, right? People who can use the fire, who can cook. Anyone who can use the fire to make something, especially because we have that blasphemy martyrdom thing going on, they are going to be, I think, the leaders of that society, because that is going to be the most valuable of the things we have to offer.
That's perfectly fair, and I like that. I know the little sub faction I've been working on in this universe. Be quiet, and I don't know why you're telling me there's a Gundam nearby.
I have to go. It's me, the Gundam.
Gundam.
We were talking about Lancer.
We were talking about Lancer earlier.
I like the idea. Like, I'm working on a little subculture in this setting, and they are very much a largely tinkering, almost alchemist-driven society where they very much value knowledge and the dissemination of it. And even their war hosts are basically just like tinkerers and engineers and alchemists. They're all battle alchemists. So, like, even they don't have a regimental forces that you would think of a normal structure. For them, in their military aspect, they literally are led by, like, basically field scientists and field alchemists. And I like the idea that this civilization, not military again, I was using regiment to describe literally the person and the group of people beneath, because we have the player character, whoever they embody. And in this case, they're embodying this forge master who's leading this group of people. I like that idea. That's really cool. And I was going to say, like, that seems really awesome to sort of build around, like old longhouse, like the old lords of, like, pre-medieval society, where basically your power was from your ability to keep a hearth going. And that is literally the biggest invitation. Yeah, that's your sign of authority. I'm warm in winter.
So
and martyrdom comes from, like, the idea of I immolate, right? Like, I give myself to the hearth. I give myself to the fire that sustains. It is martyrdom in this case is dedication to a life in service of the hearth, of the fire. And you can only gain power by knowing what goes into the power. So it's like, I think it sounds, as we're talking about this is a very methodical society. This is not someone who's very rash. They are very particular about steps. And it seems like that tradition is very housed in something. So any deviation from that tradition would make an entirely huge schism, absolutely, because it's built into their culture, into who they are, that it's the people who know how to make the thing slowly and patiently that can earn the power. Well, that might not be the case with this newer tradition.
Interesting.
So this society sounds almost it's either communal or feudalist, and I think we're leaning communal, since, like, the most prevalent people are the ones that can provide, like, and, like, make things. So the idea of that the leaders are just would be regular people in other societies is very interesting. Like, the idea that we can forge things. So, like, okay, they're a leader because they can make weapons, or they can make this and that, or they can craft buildings,
structures.
Yeah. Like,
what if we use the Naomi Novak sort of short story about the potter's wife, about it's a dying art, the idea of being able to make weapons from this fire, this very specific igneous kind of weapon, right? This thing made from a specific kind of rock that is given to them by the volcano. After the whole devastating event, that way is dying. That way wasn't passed on fast enough. So you now have a culture that's dying out as a new wave is coming in response to that. And we're losing sort of what makes that, what the founding of that tradition was. So it's sort of like, not only are we doing a schism of belief, but we're losing the cultural identity of the thing because the knowledge of the cultural identity is lost.
I mean, like, that makes a lot of sense. And the entertaining thing is we could even tie this with that disaster, like, directly one-to-one. It's like a Pompeii situation. Where are all the forge masters who work with this rock going to work? On a volcano. They're going to work on the shores, on the mountainsides of those volcanoes. So it's probably where they're getting most of their stone. And yeah, that thing goes Mount St. Helens, there goes.
They're gone.
Yeah, that's the entirety of all your master forge masters, just all their workshops, all their works, them.
Yeah, their capital would be literally built up the side of this volcano, and they didn't realize it would erupt at any point.
Well, I think the thing is, like, if there's magma there, they would know that. But so I think maybe it's sort of like a president situation where they keep a few in reserve, but it wasn't enough. And now
Yeah.
it's like no one's interested anymore in learning this way. There's new ways of doing things. There's bayonets. There's like beautiful new things that they can get from other places. Why would they need to make something themselves? And the idea of self reliance is fading as well, which then we get into like this martyrdom, the banishment, that kind of thing.
Hmm. So you have these folks who are enamored with the old ways, who are very slow to change, and perhaps see a value in the old ways that younger generations or that newer peoples don't see. And a lot of the newer generations, especially in the wake of this apocalypse, I'm getting a very strong, like almost real world parallel. As a 30-something-year-old, I've been made aware by a lot of people in my day that there is a distinct difference between people from the generations before me and my generation and the younger generations coming after. And there's a difference of perspective in the world. A lot of people, not all of them, of course, but there's a generational shifting from traditional thinking and a longer term view of things handed down to nowadays millennials and Gen X and Gen Zers and a lot of folks in those cultures. We are extremely swift to assess these traditional views and values and either say whether they are something we're going to keep or just immediately toss out without any discussion. And so you have this culture now that's broken between the younger, highly pragmatic, we are looking at the smoldering hole in the center of our civilization and we need to fix it. We might not have time to use these old methods that might have worked well in your day, but not for us. And the older people who might have seen the virtue and the value in these older ways, but might not be fully aware of the scope of the threat that these younger generations are facing moving forwards as the loss of this skill, the loss of this method of building is lost to time.
I think in that case, we need to make this an insular place, right? Because then if we make it insular, then it becomes okay. They've been building this, they've been doing this. It's also a fear of opening the door because war just this destroy them. I don't, and we're still need to figure out if it's war or volcano. I like the
Right,
idea it's a volcano, but like in innocence, right? The idea that
right,
the doors have been blown open. There's no closing them again.
right. It
It's
could be
open.
both.
It could be both.
I mean, like, it's like most real world disasters. Sure, there's usually one thing we can point to that's an instigating factor, but 9 times out of 10, a disaster is brought on not by one failure, but by many. And so, it's the whole like what led to the rise of fascism in Germany post World War One.
Right.
It wasn't just the war and the horrifying number of people who were shell shocked and injured as a result, or the loss of national pride from having been on the wrong side of what was effectively a massive treaty negotiation that cost millions of lives set across all of Europe. And it wasn't just the crash of the Deutschmark, it was all of that and much, much more, all fed into a terrible moment in history where something horrible happened. And I feel
Yeah.
like this culture is because we've already established in this setting that the big superpower empire that kind of kept everyone else in check, morality, good or bad, however you want to view it. I personally think they were a problem, and their fall was probably good for the world. But in the short term, it is very much the breaking and resetting of a bone, and the whole world order is kind of imploded. And these people probably caught it really bad, and right after this major national disaster.
Like
So
opening the door to the vault in Fallout, right? It's like there's a
yeah,
whole world outside that's lived so much, that has dealt with so much, and you are a fresh face. And I mean, people can resent the shit out of that.
yeah,
Absolutely. And I think we were talking about deciding between the eruption of this volcano being like the catalyst. Why not since this empire fell, why not have like multiple things, as Omni was saying? Why not? People could have started invading this country. They could have been like, yeah, fuck your isolationist policies. We're going to come in and we're going to start trading with your people because you have a valuable resource on your land that we don't have where we're from. You have a very, very fertile country that is like ready to produce crops. And guess what? Our neighbor literally just salted all of our fields. So we need food. So you don't have a choice. You're either going to die or you're going to have to open your doors and start trading with us. And that was probably that was the catalyst. All
What
those
if
things led up to the catalyst that would
what
cause
if they
them to break
wanted
their
the
isolationist policies.
what if they wanted the secret to making these weapons?
I could
What
Back
very
up.
if
much do that.
what if
Yep.
they wanted the secret to making these weapons and it wasn't an accident that they were destroyed? What if the leader, the Hearthmaster, the Forge Lord, right? I'm just gonna say Forge Lord for now until we think of something else. But the
Right.
Forge Lord saw what was happening and was like, I have something I have to do. Took the records of how to make this and was like, because to me, like if we're doing this post like World War I kind of society where we're in industrial, there's science happening, there's records happening. By end of World War I, people understood what
Right.
volcanoes were and how they erupted, and we're able to track that. And who's going to know that better than the keeper of the fire? And I think maybe there was sort of like, oh my god, this is going to happen. We get a little chainsaw man in here, and it's like, did they know it was going to happen?
I
Maybe.
still need to watch that anime.
Oh,
I hear
it's
it's so
so
good.
fucking good. Anyway,
Everyone says it's good. The animation's so beautiful. I want
it's
to watch it.
it
Also, the
mimics
adorable fucking chainsaw dog. Anyway,
that's not in most of it. You know that everyone
I
needs
know
to
it's not. I
understand the
know it's
chainsaw
not.
dog is in like episode 1.
I know. I've seen. I couldn't go on YouTube without seeing the entirety of episode 1 in hundreds of YouTube clips splayed everywhere on autoplay. I saw
It's
all
really
of
good.
episode 1.
It's really good.
Watch it.
But the idea is like now we get to what kind of people are they? What is their metal made of? And the metal is like, you know, no pun intended, I guess, because then we get to martyrdom. What is
Right.
more martyrdom than the destruction of a way of life to prevent violence and to prevent the ill use of it?
They literally
But yeah,
destroyed their old traditions to prevent other people from using it for ill-gotten gain.
very like nuclear weapony.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
really cool. Mutually assured destruction. I mean,
And
that sounds
Yeah.
that sounds
It'd be
like
like
a
if
cool.
Einstein
Retaliate.
grabbed the first plans for the nuclear bomb and walked into fucking Mount Doom and threw them in.
That's exactly
Like-
it. But
Yeah.
here's where it comes in. Here's where that magical element comes in. Writing down the names, the listed names of those who died. It's not done with ink. It is done with the ashes of the rock. It is done with pieces of the rock, and that is the magic that is left and treasured. And that's what each commander is given when they go into the field, a little sack of this dust when they come from this place.
Like that.
The sack of dust can be used to write down the names of those who have died in their regiment, and they are able to then bring sort of like this fiery, ghostly army to fight at their side. But the devastation of it, the resonance of it, like it's torture to bring these
Right.
people back like that. It is torture. But it's part of how it's like continuous. We immolate ourselves. It's martyrdom. Even when you
like
die, your life does not belong to you.
What if it's like instead of like literally just creating these like reminds me of what are those people called? The the ash elementals from like Soul Slime.
Oh, I thought you were going to mention
Scrolls.
the Legion of the Damned. Never mind.
Oh well, yeah, I guess that would be Warhammer. No, but like
Yeah.
I like the idea of like this Talier literally just sprinkles the dust upon people and it's just like, go now, you carry the mantle of the dead ones. And it's sort of like it's gonna sound awful. It's like supernatural cocaine. They literally just like imbibe themselves with it and become empowered with the fall. I always make this joke. I'm like, don't you guys know you can just reach up into the sky, eat a bird, and gain his power of flight? But what if that's in the literal sense? Like they literally consume the dust of the dead ones and they gain their abilities for like a short amount of time.
Do a line of rock, baby.
I want to fucking line a grandma real quick. I'm gonna fucking
Oh god.
I'm gonna learn how to basket weave.
So
You can
I'm gonna
mix
make.
the ashes in. Go ahead.
I was gonna say if I can make the comparison, like for me, since we had a Mass Effect reference, here's a Mass Effect 2 reference. Very much the Collector General, assuming direct control, where like every once in a while you'll be
Yeah.
fighting, and there's one of the collectors will have a freak out, full body, full grand mal siege, and you're like, the fuck is going on? Then he erupts in orange fire and starts throwing biotics, and you're like, holy fuck. So maybe these people have the ability to do that. Maybe not the entire army. Maybe it's like a thing that only, again, so we're talking about
It's like
leadership.
Achilles.
Exactly. Like individual leaders or
Bloodlust.
like elite troops that are trusted with it. We have a very almost like a religious kind of connotation in this whole ritual. So maybe this is sort of one of those like inner mystery kind of things. Only those who are entrenched in elements of their culture or their I don't want to say mythology because mythology implies that it's based on myth, and this is very clearly a practical, workable thing they can
This is
do.
real, very real.
Yeah, no, it's hard to call it mythology when the burning, like screaming soul of someone is embodied in someone else who's pulling someone apart
Whoever,
like a toy.
whoever uses it, that's blasphemous because it's wasteful. It is violence for violence's sake
I do
because
like that.
it's fire. So whoever uses it, so the commander, by going out and knowing this is my last line of defense, that's basically suicide. That's basically like, I know I can't go home again if I use this. This is my last resort. So it's super powerful and it gets the
Right.
job done. But now the player also mechanically cannot use it every time. It's like, no, this is one and done.
I feel like to make it to make it so that it's not a I feel like we can reach a compromise with this
Mhm.
because like as a weird feature for a force, a force, a regiment, a corps of diplomats, whatever. Um, it's the sort of thing that like the weird of your army is something that gives you flavor. And I don't want to punish someone for choosing a weird and then be like, you used it, cool, fuck you, you don't get to use it again. Because
Mm.
although we do want to also capture that this is a serious bit of gravitas
That's a whole
here.
roleplay arc right there.
It,
Is like convincing
yeah,
people that using this stuff is helping us. But like it could be a cultural thing, like using this stuff for anything other than writing the names of the dead is considered
right,
blasphemous. But the whole
That way
idea
you
is just
have the
like
minor weird, and then if you want to
right.
use the kamikaze weird, you absolutely can. But
mm,
then it's like you face your own set of consequences with it, same as you would for morale, because they're martyrs.
I
Morale
feel
is probably going to decrease less for them,
right.
maybe, but like
maybe they have a higher
some,
morale overall, but like they have abilities that decrease their morale over
yeah,
time.
it's more
Yeah.
decreased mechanically morale. So it's like it's fucked up what you can do, but goddamn, can you do it?
What if we have it where if a unit goes whole hog and does this, and they go full on Zenkai boost, they do a line of grandma, and they're out there causing havoc.
We can call them
Um,
cocaine bears. We
sure,
can call them
cocaine.
cocaine
If
bears.
they go full cocaine bear, what if it's something you can only do if you do it to if you would elect a unit sleep like you basically if we're talking like in terms of again combat, but in any circumstance, if you do this and you use this ability, you would use it on a regiment or an element of your force. If they do it, they are lost. They get super powerful effects for the duration of whatever conflict you're in. So if it's diplomats, they might do it and they might be wielding the full like historical might of the most famous diplomats that they might have on that scroll. So there might be a benefit to that. So like someone walks in like, what's with the guy with who's like seems to be trailing embers? Oh, you should hear that guy talk. He spits fire. And then the guy leaves out, and then just when they leave, they just don't go home. Their regiment or their group is considered broken and effectively destroyed. They are
It's like Fallout
exiles.
1. It's like Fallout 1
Yeah.
they send the Wanderer out into the wastelands, like, okay, you need to go get us a new water ship, and then he comes back, and this isn't a spoiler. This game's fucking 30 years old. So he's just like he's like, well, we can't let you back in because you're tainted with the wasteland, and the thing is, you're inevitably not because we hate you, but because if you come back, people are going to hear your stories and they're going to want to go out there too, and we cannot lose what we have here. And it's just like,
Right.
yeah, you're a blasphemer, so you're not allowed to return. So you must know that
Right.
what you're doing is that you are defiling yourself in order to get some sort of gain. But you're not like frowned upon by your like regiment for doing that. You're just
So
like,
the
well, you made your bed, and now you're gonna lay in it. Like,
No,
so the
it's very like
person is
chivalry.
banished.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So the
you
person is
defiled your honor,
banished.
so you can't go home. It's
So
as
the
simple as that.
person is banished, but in their actions, they become martyrs as well.
Yep.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
like the ideal of chivalry. You can never actually meet it, but you try anyway. And the trying is the chivalry. The doing is.
I
And
like
that's
that.
the martyrdom. It's not gaining the martyrdom that is the goal. It is trying to do the thing that the martyrdom would do. Even
Agreed.
if you cannot achieve the martyrdom, it is still the trying.
I have to also say very quickly, Inquisitor Daedalus Kane, quote, snorts ancestor Ash, witness me, jumps into the fire. I am so glad someone made that reference because I realized we left Fury Road out of that reference, and that didn't feel complete with
We
it.
did leave a Mad Max reference on the table earlier, and
We
so I'm
did.
glad we brought it back.
I like this. I like this dust being called something like derivative of igneous. So I wanted to call it like the igni.
The
Hmm.
Neo.
The
Igni
Neo
and
what?
Ash, maybe?
Igni and Ash is really cute.
Igni and Ash. I like Igni and Ash.
Igni Ash. Igni and Ash.
I'm apparently decent at naming weird fantasy and science
That's
fiction
really,
stuff.
that's really good. Holy
So-
shit.
It's the one thing I know I can do. Where I'm like, okay, now how do I make rules and stats for it?
Oh, okay,
Dot,
but
dot,
these,
dot.
if it's
Fuck.
called Igni and Ash, that means these people are called the Igni.
Okay, I like that. Or
Right.
at least that's like the place where the volcano was.
Or Igni
Like,
was the Forge Lord that destroyed everything.
could be their order even, like Igni
Order
and
of the
Forge
Igni order.
Masters. Yeah, the
Igni
Igni
and
orders.
order.
Kind of
I
like
like
that.
So is it the Order, their country, or the Forge Lord?
It's gonna be the Forge lore. The lore,
Yeah.
Forge lore. It's gonna be, well, we use the martyrdom, right, to say like as a kingdom.
Yeah, they're a
So
martyr.
why wouldn't it be based on the martyrdom versus the rock? So I think the igneous ash is good because that's the actual material. But for them, it would be like the Order of Martyrs or the martyrly parade.
So
I think Parade of Martyrs sounds good. Or Column of Martyrs or something like that.
What's
That
a group
sounds-
of martyrs called? A
Why don't we
murder
just-
of martyrs.
why don't we just call them the Procession or something like that? Because it has like a very like
Procession sounds
funerary
Ooh,
kind of
the
vibe.
Procession sounds
procession.
good.
That's sick.
I was gonna say a tragedy of martyrs, but a profession.
Tragedy of
a
Tragedy of
procession
martyrs.
sounds so much better.
A tragedy of martyrs is the name, is the epic of the destroying of the igneous blades.
Yo, that actually sounds. That's oh god, that's
That's
messed
the
up.
ancient
I love
epic.
that.
That's the epic.
I love that.
Kane brought up something earlier in chat about how they didn't really have a name for an eruption of a volcano before Mount Vesuvius erupted. So he's like, they ended up calling it a volcano because of Vulcan, the god of the forge and god of fire. So I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Little factual tidbit I really liked a
That's
lot.
fun.
That's
Thank you,
really
Vulcan.
cool, and kind of a little bit sad that they're like, yes, this is our first experience. We need a name for this horrible, terrible thing. What about that fire god who gets the crap kicked out of him by the whole pantheon all the time? Let's lay this at his feet.
He's just mad because he's a bitch.
What was his Hephaestus?
Festus, yeah.
Like, could you imagine like they didn't have like if they actually discovered this before Romans took up Vulcan, so they just named it like, oh yeah, that's a Hefano, like that. Oh yeah,
That's
that
what actually started the wars.
they're misnaming things.
Oh my god. It's the GIF versus GIF wars. Like,
Oh my
that's
God.
the worst.
That's the next Peloponnesian War is Jim versus.
I've seen this meme. It's just like people that go to heaven because they call God Jod instead of God because
my
pronunciation
God.
of the G. Oh, there was a
The book-
big
The Book
Big
of
thing.
Gob.
the Book of Gob.
See, now that you say
Oh my God.
you said the Peloponnesian Wars, in my head it's just like now I see like literally just people beating each other to death with keyboards strapped to sticks, and just the image is very, very potent. I need to draw that.
You need to go draw. Go free your fingers from this malice.
It's right here. I'll try. So these people can use Igni and Ash as a last line of defense, and I feel like it is important to find a way to integrate this. And again, like you mentioned, this isn't just warfare. There's different ways of approaching this. You
Well,
can have it.
it's
Go ahead.
so the Aboleth from the Dungeons and Dragons universe comes to mind, where each Aboleth is its own individual entity, but it can tap into the collective understanding of every single Aboleth that was ever made, which is, I think, the coolest shit that no one uses with an Aboleth.
I love that.
That's why they're geniuses, because they are old, but like they know everything. So it's the idea of like you aren't just tapping into like this power; it's you are tapping into the collective consciousness of the volcano.
Ooh, I
Ooh.
like that. So it's literal supernatural assistance, like in this respect. That really is assuming direct control. I
It
like
is.
that.
It is like a god, something enters, and then it can be a whole arc of, is it our god or is it something else? What's actually in the volcano? And then that could be a fun spiral off.
Okay, genuine thought here. What if the reason why the ash and the way we connect the ancestors and the ash is that by using the ash, you gain the power of that ancestor as the volcano remembers them.
How do you get a volcano to remember them?
Well, like the earth remembers you, sort of.
What a
Kind of like
fucking
when
weird
Because I'm
question.
gonna assume they cremate.
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you have a perfectly good volcano there. And
You have a perfectly good volcano. Throw them in.
They probably have reliquaries of people that die that they see as like high martyrs, and they carry around little vials of ash with them, or their urns, and they
Yeah,
like give them
exactly.
power, that sort of thing.
So it's kind of just this supernatural, like, is it the actual person or just this mythological empowerment, like this mythological or this mythologized version of the person? Like,
Is this orc logic? If they believe in something hard enough, it just becomes true.
kind of like it might actually be them. Maybe that's why it's torturous, because this dead person or the spirit of them or something that's so close to them that it might as well be them is being forced to do this shit that there's no possible way they'd be able to do in life, but here they are. It's being demanded of them. They rise to the occasion, but my god, is that not painful? It'd be
I had
like
a
being
revelation.
stretched like taffy.
I have a revelation.
Hmm.
It is your memory of the person, and you are defiling that memory.
Oh,
And
that's
that
fucked.
is,
I
it is
love that.
psychic pain. It is not actually you are hurting this dead person. It is you are burning your own memory. You are defiling your
Oh.
recollection of the person. Because isn't that the tradition of, like, the greatest thing is to forget something? The greatest thing is to burn it away. You cannot bring back something that is burned away. So when you do it, that is blasphemous, and that is why it is blasphemy. When something is
like-
destroyed, it must stay destroyed.
So when you destroy this ash by like imbibing it, that means that the memory of this person is like cleansed from like the pool of knowledge, like they no longer exist,
Or from them.
or they never
It's a
existed.
personal sacrifice.
Yeah, it's a personal sacrifice because fire does cleanse, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of it, the reason that I'm thinking of this on almost a mechanical level, but also on like a lore level as well. So if a unit or group or like small force uses this stuff and they briefly become supernaturally adept at whatever it is, they're the best negotiators in the world, or they like have an insane buff in combat, or they can haggle in a way that seems unnaturally effective. Like, we're talking devil deals level of, like, you really can't refuse these people. They just get into your head. And then afterward, they leave, they disband, they are martyred, not because their culture casts them out, because they literally, when they're done, it just leaves them, and everything that they were goes with it. And just a blank slate new person. They're like, just go.
I'm not sure that's fun to play. I think you erase yourself from the collective memory, but not from your own memory. Like, I think you still want to play within that, right? Like, of
Right.
your regiment remembers you, but maybe not everybody back home.
Oh, right. Well, I'm taking it from the perspective. I'm taking this from the perspective that if a commander or a leader of one of these groups ever did this, that sounds like a swan song. That sounds to me like if a commander were to use this ability, that would probably, especially since we're talking like this is a last resort, right? Like,
I think it should be if you use a certain amount. So maybe it's like, because I want, like, there's longevity after the fact of, like, yes, you have to deal with the fallout if you used it once. You maybe get 3 uses. If you use all of it in one fucking go, that's the swan song. That's the death. But if you are using it over a period of time, for example, 3 hits of it is incredibly powerful, goes very quickly. But if you use it like 1, 2, 3, maybe it lasts for a couple of days. Like, you reap the benefits for a certain amount of time. And that's why, like, the idea is, like, you don't want to waste anything.
Right.
You don't want to waste anything. So it's like,
what if we truncate these rules? So we have the rules for the player character who's leading this force of whatever it is.
I have a bit of an idea if you allow me to interrupt you for a second.
By all means, my dude.
Okay, so we all have these ashes. Blah blah blah. Why don't we have? Well, yeah. I mean, you're leaving with ashes, and it's just like there's one okay purpose behind these ashes, and that's to mark down the names of the dead, lest they be lest they be forgotten. But the person who bears the ash, I don't think the Talier can also bear all these urns at once. So what if there is an urn bearer, somebody that literally is in charge of keeping track of the usage of these ashes, and that could create an inner conflict in the group too. So inner conflict for this session. Somebody's been stealing ashes from the urn bearer whilst he sleeps. So you need to find out who that is, because that is high heresy. That's like punishable by death. Just like stealing you, because you're stealing the remains of your ancestors and your family, and stuff like that. So that's a high death. So I'm thinking like the wielder of this weird, as we've been calling it, would be not the Talier, but the urn bearer themselves. They would be the ones that give this out. They're the ones that ration this incredibly powerful stuff, and that would also be roleplay, because you as the commander would have to convince them to like give this stuff up so that we can survive. Because so that would be its own little argument going on.
Interesting. Kind of like that, and that would also allow us to localize the effect of that too. So, in a way, like, because what I was saying was like the idea of, usually whenever I think about like the mechanics of like mass, not just mass combat, mass anything, like I'm thinking MCDM's what's called again, Kingdoms and Empires kind of expansion rules. Like, sure, they have rules in there for like if you want to have a dude or a dudette or someone following you who joins your party from your empire. But 9 times out of 10, the rules for the people, the subjects, the mechanics of your empire are intentionally truncated down or like simplified, so they can be done relatively quick in the back. So like without consuming more time than like the already, depending on what your class you're playing, arduous task of maintaining your own personal bookkeeping. So what if you could have it where, yes, there is like that steady flow that goes in your forces. That's what accounts for that increased performance we get, the ability to become more powerful. That might have like some sort of morale resistance, but it erodes with time. The effects grow with time. That just is a baseline expectation for the troops. When they use it, they're assumed to just go whole hog, because that's kind of just like okay, I want a unit or I want a group, a force, a unit of diplomats, whatever, to just go ham. And I know I'm going to lose them after this. I know they're going to be lost after this. And that is the mechanical sacrifice. You are probably going to do something incredible with them. But it's kind of like, it's almost like being a barbarian in that way, where if you go into a rage, you're inviting, which someone's going to beat the shit out of you. Like, you're going to get hit by everyone and the grandma. But, man, you better hope, if you're on the other side of that axe, that you're not the one being swung at. And so, but for the individual player character, I do like the idea that it's a personal balance of that. Like how much do I use? If I use too much, it can really fuck us up. And I like that a lot. I like both sides of that. So that's my thought on it. But I love the urn bearers. Like, you could have individual units with urn bearers. Like maybe like way other regiments might carry, or other groups might carry banners or flags.
I just imagine a guy that's like the Happy Mask salesman from Legend of Zelda. He's literally just like has this massive pack, but it's just covered in these clay pots that are all secured with like and baskets, like woven containers, and like all strung up and like covered in ropes, and just like this. And then the urn bearer might be a giant, like one of the biggest people. That's an age old thing. It's just like they pick the biggest and strongest to be grenadiers and the royal infantry and like in Britain and France. So they pick the biggest and strongest to bear the weight, be it physically and mentally, of carrying around the ashes of your ancestors. So these urn bearers would probably be really fucking strong and big, like monsters.
I think every single person in this nation, because they have to climb up and down that volcano, has incredible calves.
Oh, absolutely. It is buns and thighs.
They never skip the legs.
Absolutely. Like the arms, fine. The legs, the ass, everybody, incredible.
They're bottom heavy. They're pear-shaped. Every single one of them. They're all
bounce a dime literally across the empire. It wouldn't touch the ground. It would just bounce on ass from one side of the empire to the other.
That's their ability. Is they're just so like attractive. The bottom half is just so beautiful that everyone's like, that's art. That's fucking
That's
art.
art.
We can't fuck with you.
I like the idea of like other countries being like, their asses are so fine, we need
Their
them.
asses are immaculate.
That's the
Sir, I've
asset
come here to
replacement.
procure ass.
Known for
You're
the
climbing
ass,
up
baby. You can bounce
Ah.
it. You can bounce it. What's the currency in this world?
I don't know.
I think every empire
Everybody
had
would
their
have
own
their
at
own, I
this
think.
point. Yeah.
Give
The
me when
one
you-
the one empire that might have had the big one, they just crumbled. So who cares what they used?
Yeah.
Well, I can't make a joke. You can bounce a nickel off that ass. Oh, without a nickel replacement. So I guess that joke is fucked. You're welcome. But no, I think mechanically this works. What I worry about is, like a role play kind of way. If we put a stopper to it, if we put an end to it, that's the end of the character. That's death, basically. So we want, in order to continue something, I think like if you use all of it, right? Like you're exiled, but you still have the best interests at heart. And this is where we get into martyrdom and irregular and what we were talking about before with that kind of banishment mentality of like, now you are no longer allowed to go home. You must redeem yourself. You have to return this. You have to recapture that innocence. You have to go and reclaim what you knew before that. So that's the task. If you use all of it, you can't go back. They give it to you with the expectation you might. And they also are like, but it's a waste of human life if we abandon you. If you can return to innocence, if you can cleanse the fire, you can come back. That way, the player, as this commander, still has a way to lead them back. Has something to work towards.
This almost sounds like an arc of a paladin or a cleric or a warlock losing their patron. Like
Yeah,
it's not the
it's very
end of your
similar.
character. You just need to go on an alternate path. There's like a mini quest or a side quest that's now attached to your
Exactly.
character to complete your character again, basically. I like that. That's
That's
very cool.
beautiful. You go on this like horrible like war scourge journey, and then the second half of the arc is just like, I'm gonna go on a spiritual journey. I'm gonna find myself again. I'm gonna like know what I am in my core.
I'm going to Coachella.
I'm going to Burning Man, dude.
I'm going to Burning Man. But yeah, I'm gonna go take some ayahuasca in the desert for $1 million. Petrified. But I do really like this idea. Like, I think the thing that's missing from a lot of war stories is that, and I think Hemingway dealt with this. I think like every writer who's ever written about war has had to question, like, can I ever go home again? Even if you are in a war itself. And this kind of manifests that question of like, you do atrocities, you see awful things. What is home? And you can't go home again. You can't go back to who you were. So who do you become? And this building this in gives players who seek it the ability to do good and bring beauty back into their story since they've hit the apex. So it's like in the hero's journey, if we're mapping it to that, like they've left, they've changed, but now we need to sort of bring it back. They need to go on this journey. They need to refuse the call, and the call's been answered, all that shit, and then just start again. And I think it should be humbling. I think it should have like that innocence to it, a sense of hope, and having to navigate that. And even like maybe they find a dead urn bearer. Maybe there's somewhere in the world there is someone who has stolen stashes of igneous ash.
That's such a huge thing that actually this is probably a long shot. Have either of you two ever seen the series known as Sharp?
No.
Okay.
No.
So Sharp is it's a period piece set in the early British Empire, yada yada. It has I can't remember his name, God help me, Sean Bean. It has Sean Bean in it as the titular main character, Lieutenant Sharp. And in it, there is this one point moment that is actually tied to real historical precedent, which is if a regiment is given the privilege of carrying an empire's colors, then the idea of bearing into battle is one, psychological. Like if I look across a field and I'm like, oh, it's just the Union Jack, who gives a shit? But if I see the Union Jack and then I see the fucking Queen's banner next to it, and I see all the other shit next to it, I'm like, oh fuck, I have no idea what this army is bringing, but whatever it is, they're confident enough that they gave the Queen's banners to this empire. I'm gonna probably reassess my life choices now. And in the show, one of the characters, one of the side characters, loses the king's colors in battle, and they find out about it. And this guy is basically told like, I'm going to commit you to war in France. So your regiment's probably going to die, but you might get something back. And he's like, I have friends at court. And the guy just stands up and says, if you lose the king's colors, you have no friends in the king's court. And it's a very impactful moment where you're like, fuck. And I feel like, because that is a way that a regiment can be restored or given great honor, is reclaiming the king's colors. That feels like this sort of same imagery, recovering the urns, recovering the ashes. If another regiment, overtakes another, destroys it, or if they just lose, the urns, and they might view that as just like, oh, shit happens, it's war. They might not punish a regiment for losing it, but the act of recovering them could be a massive. That seems like the way for me. That'd be like the quest for that.
I think it'd be one of them anyways.
Yeah.
If those urns are captured, everyone in that regiment is dead.
Oh, absolutely. They're taken.
That regiment's dead.
Yeah. Yeah, again, the king's colors. You drop the king's colors. Like, fuck.
Like,
either sort that out or they will not let you home.
No, like, they wouldn't let it go without a fight. Which means, like, they would, if someone who is not from the martyrdom got their hands on these urns, it's because they've slaughtered people. It's because they killed everybody in that regiment, because there's no way. Maybe there's like one guy left who keeps trying to get it, and he's scared, and then we can get into this whole idea of like, as a side quest of like, okay, all that shit of we must meet the martyrdom, we can only try, but and grappling with the actual idea of chivalry, and that could be like a mouthpiece for that as a side quest or something.
Right.
But that could be a cool thing.
I like that. Again, to like briefly use that example, the guy who lost the colors, he was one of two commanders. The other commander died. And the guy's like, whoa, what? I was supposed to die? He's like, yes. The other man at least had, what was it? The one guy's like, well, I mean, I wasn't the one who lost the colors. That guy was. I was just in the battle. And he said, then you should have died like him, because at least he died trying to get the colors back. What's your excuse?
Exactly. I think that's very close to what this is.
Yeah, me too.
I like
this whole. They have like a grasp on like superstitious, but like it's not necessarily superstition at all. It's more so, it's very much Western European. I mean, this group seems pretty agnostic and when it comes to like cultural wise, but it gives me that Western European vibe of just like rigid structure where your place, and if you fuck up, you fucked up, like from birth. Like that if you do something like this, you're fucked, and you need to figure out a way to fix it immediately or you're gone. So these people know their place, and I think that amongst these people that they just have this really rigid structure. Not meaning that you can't elevate yourself in this structure, but it's rigid in the way that they know what they from birth to death, what's going to happen to you.
I also think so in terms of agriculture, I think one, like, they grow coffee and some, like, they got like grapevines,
they got
coffee, all that
coffee.
shit. But like, coffee grows best by volcanoes.
That was something Omni and I were talking about. I don't mean to cut you off, but Omni and I were talking about like, which of these groups of people is going to produce coffee, because coffee would be super popular, right? So that breaking of isolation, that make them a big trade hub for coffee, like, and other things, maybe even cacao and stuff like that.
But I think like the way that they eat is going to be on the cusp of life and death with moss and mushrooms, because they live in the shadow of the volcano. So they get more moist, dank places. So that's going to be a huge piece of it. And mushrooms live in a space between death and life. So I think for this very rigid culture of what death means, I think that maybe this is something, because like philosophy is born of the things around us. I think philosophers of this place would look at mushrooms and see that cycle of life and death and life again, which would in fact mirror the igneous ash, which can for some take on maybe a religious context. And then for others, the idea of the volcano itself being an eruption, the eruption from the power of this ash, and then sort of the idea of cleansing a fire is still resonant. But that's sort of what I'm thinking for like the agriculture that informs the philosophy. because that's very much what happened with like Socrates and Plato and everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that idea that they find meaning in mundane things and they see certain foods as say that is a very big tie to the real world. I mean, there are religions and cultures that don't eat certain types of meat literally because of the fact that like it is sacred. So I could see mushroom like gardens being like cultivated and not for the purpose of like eating them, but just having them because it's it's like a holy place. It's this place people go to meditate or relax and call it. So they probably have like these gargantuan fucking mushrooms and
If
stuff
that
like
is
Everyone
that.
can.
the case,
Yeah.
then there are two new things added to this culture that must be true if that is true. So if it is true that they have beautiful mushroom gardens, one, psychedelics are going to be a large part of the culture, which means they're tripping in the fucking volcano.
My
So
Celtic
I just
ancestors are happy.
which also means that there is, because psychedelics are a thing, there's going to be interpretation of psychedelics, which means there will be prophecy. There will be sibyls and seers in this culture, in this very strict religious culture, which means that the mountain now takes on this volcano, takes on a religious psychedelic significance, which means, and I'm going to keep going of like, if this is true, what else is true? If they have these psychedelic mushrooms as in gardens, so they're like inhaling it, they're part of it. They go up to the mountain, which means physical exercise, right? So they're exhausted, they're high. That means they are going to not be able to leave the mountain for a little bit. They're not going to be able to leave the volcano, which means that they are going to spend a lot of time looking into the flames. They're going to feel heat, they're going to read smoke. They're going to be doing prophecy in fire, the licking of embers, and smoke itself, not water. So those are also going to be two things that are true. So we have this warrior area, right? We have these commanders, but now there's an option for like prophecy, for like psychedelic. I am here because I can see the future. Here are my group of sibyls. We have come to broker peace. We have come to take a side. We've come to lend our assistance. So now we have a new avenue with this kind of thing.
Yeah, and I like you were saying with the psychedelics, there's a lot of historians that suspect that the consumption of accidental consumption of psychedelic things in like ancient civilization is what led to the creation of religion to begin with. The whole idea of just like, oh yeah, this guy just ate this thing and now he's like tripping balls and seeing like weird rings with like eyeballs on them and then there's like wings coming off of them. It's just like a lot of that is where they think early Christianity came from. It's just like they had a large surplus of psychedelics and until they knew any better, they're just like, oh, I must be seeing vision because of this, and not because of the thing I ate, but just because, you know. So like, oh, I spoke with God because of X, Y, and Z. It's like you spoke with yourself because you were tripping balls so hard on whatever psychedelic that you had. You were like communicating with something else. It's that's a really interesting take on things, and I like the idea that these mushroom gardens are literal holy places, like, and that could be a whole conflict in its own right. There's some blasphemer that stole a bunch of these mushrooms and left the country and try to take them somewhere else. Be like, dude, you can get hella fucking high off of this shit, and your whole job would be to track them down and make sure that it doesn't spread. Because
Market now.
yeah,
There's a
Yeah.
whole market.
yes,
I
these
feel
guys
like
grow
that,
coffee, hardcore fucking drugs.
dude. They could literally find out about this. This could be the sort of quest that could start at a bacchanali marketplace, where like your force is just like hanging out there. You're doing your thing, and you're like, hey, that's a familiar smell. What the fuck is that? And you walk over like, how did you get these? Who do I need to talk to? Like, and then it very quickly was like, oh shit, these are ours, and someone stole them. And for me, it feels very much like these things, if they are consumed, it's very much like religious food used in ritual in many other places. Again, I was raised Catholic, so for me, the easy recognition is unleavened bread and wine. Like if anyone's ever been out there who is Catholic and they've gone to church, when you're a kid, you hear about you get to eat bread and wine when you're going to church eventually, and you're super jealous because you think it's going to taste delicious. And it is the single most bitter, disgusting wine in the world, with like a whole crap load of backwash because like 100 people drank out of this stupid mug. And two, the bread is literally just wafer thin, tasteless. It is not good. That is because it is designed for ritual. It is not to make you feel good because of the eating. It is the ritual that it participates that gives it its significance and value. So if that's the case, then these mushrooms, if they're used in these effects, if there is any consumption involved, it probably is done in a highly ritualized, specific way. Like, it's like the difference between going in and hotboxing in a TP with a group of people using a very specific set of medicinal herbs and blends,
Yeah.
psychedelics, to go on a vision trip, and then taking 13 pounds of cocaine and ramming it into someone's face. One of these will kill you, and in fact is probably a threat to life. The other one probably will just create an interesting spiritual culture for a community that it's involved in.
I love the idea that this is something that is gated. It's not an open practice, and it's
Right.
something that is closed within the community. And one of the essential problems of opening the gates to people is that it is now being abused and used in a way that is really disrespectful to the culture. I find that to be a very prevalent and relevant story that I think could be of use here, that I think would be very interesting to play with.
I agree.
Yeah. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Meanwhile, Hanukkah's not an open practice, so commit arson wherever you like, guys.
I love
Truly.
arson. It's one of my favorite activities.
Finally, so we've covered a little bit of what about government?
I feel like they'd have like a communal sort of vibe, like we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier. Like the important leaders are not like a Talier might be somebody that's like, oh, his Talier might be seeking redemption for some sort of blasphemous act or so. Like they saw a vision and they need to pursue it, and they're granted like a serious vision, and they're granted people to do it. But I feel like the most important people, like you were saying earlier, would be the craft people, the people that can just make things. So people, urn makers, weapon makers, people, farmers, like prominent farmers, stuff like that. Like I think very much a like actual communism type based lifestyle, not like that Marxist stuff. Like actual, like everybody has a place, and that sort
Right.
of thing.
It's an interesting idea. And I don't think I think that's a good one. Like, I feel like there have been cultures that have existed, like commune life is a thing that has existed repeatedly throughout history, especially
Mhm.
in smaller civilizations. But even then, as the bigger structures emerge from those smaller civilizations, usually like that's where you get like councils from. The concept of people meeting in a democratic state is where you have multiple people representing equal levels of power, or very least equal levels, or equal enough levels where respect must be given. And the alternative is what? You punch each other till everyone loses, or you just agree to just sit down across from each other and give each other certain agreed upon
So
rights.
did these guys have like an elder based system, like a council of elders then?
I think so. I think
Yeah.
they have to because that's where the turmoil comes from. The elders who know how to hold the fire have died.
Ah.
Right. That probably explains why the culture is in so much peril. There probably are still some ancestors, there are some, forge masters, some people who are left, but they are a smaller group than before, a dying group perhaps, or just being again outmoded by time and modernity.
Hmm.
And this culture is now it's the what's the phrase? It's the crisis of confederacy, is where I've heard it described in the past, where if you have a government that is not close enough to the people it is governing, it will inevitably lose power. And so it's the biggest issue with the form of a government that's known as confederacy. Is a confederacy works in a relatively dense area with relatively close people because you can maintain close contact.
Hmm.
But the further away a confederacy gets from its population, its land, its people directly, because it already has so few powers inherent in it and it is stripped away from that, it dissolves so simply. And so I feel like that's the crisis they're facing, is that they have this ancient historical system that has worked well in the past with the loss of so many people. And because I figure this is the sort of thing that happened in between, or like just before the collapse of this big world power that set off this whole age in the first place, it's still it's recent enough where the culture is still reeling and they haven't fully collapsed, but it's enough where they know like something's got to give, right? Like that's my thought on it anyhow.
That's the tension, and that's the tension of why go. What makes today different in this story than other days? Because that's the essential. Why are you leaving? I think like there's a lot of ties here that could happen, a lot of plot hooks that can spin out from this, including like you're being sent to go and seek aid. You are like for this culture, you are being sent to go and reclaim this thing. You are being sent out to do this. That way, you one have the ability to be engaged in political intrigue even farther away because it's so insular, and I think that's going to be key for whomever is playing is like you're being sent away but you still have a stake in the politics of the place.
Right.
And then there's also going to be a sense of like since they are so directly shaping their own government through their actions, I think that's going to be vital in terms of how in disarray is this? Who are the sides? Who are the factions? I don't think that's part of world building though. I think that's going to be part of like building out the story of like who's left, what are the factions that have arisen from this, and one of them has to be named the Phoenix.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Has to be.
Absolutely. For me, that actually brings me back to a thing I was thinking of earlier. When we were talking, I briefly mentioned this larger empire that was kind of the catalyst for the current age, or its collapse was. And we talked about briefly like these people being preyed upon by the outside world and that being where they're at now. I feel like another little, like a little thing we could put in as like part of the collapse was that this larger governmental body, this larger superpower, might have had positive ties with this community and would have sent aid
I agree.
before its collapse.
I absolutely agree. And now it's like we're fucking up a shit creek without an empire's paddle. And
Right. And so now, like that might be an example of like a quest for one of these Taliers, where it's like, go forth. We were promised aid by this cult, by this group that was working with the Empire. The Empire's collapsed, but maybe they can still lend aid. They're on the other side of the continent. You're gonna have to. You're gonna have to do something to get there. You're
I
gonna.
think there's an old treaty
Yeah.
that must be honored. I think they gave something essential to the empire before it collapsed, and they expect something in return that will be their salvation. And when the empire falls, it's kind of like this is a useless document. So go out and try and get what they promised us.
That's very dwarven grudge out of Warhammer Fantasy. It's
I do
very much.
love a dwarven grudge,
It's a
a good grudge.
Just the yes. Who's that doing this on the field? Oh, that's Ignatius Sly. He appears to have slighted your great great grandfather on
I'll
your
kill him.
mother's
I'll
side.
kill him
Oh, cool.
absolutely.
Hit him!
Yes, carve his name into this boulder and use the trebuchet to brain him.
I think we have something really great here, and I think this culture alone, this country and their subcultures, it definitely make for a lot of great short stories. It would also make for a lot of great campaigns for players that are just like, yeah, I want my leader to be from this country. And like, okay, so what are they doing? And they have all these interesting ties and stuff like that, and a lot of intrigue.
We
So
made a
good.
lot of story hooks for this one. I don't think we've done that as much with the other factions that have emerged so far.
Yeah, we absolutely
Yeah!
have. Yeah,
I'm counting this a victory.
this is victory. This is a big
100%.
victory. So, okay, well, we are over the usual session by about 20 minutes.
We had a good time. We had a good time.
Yeah, we absolutely had a great time. I don't care if the session runs over as long as we're coming up with cool stuff and having a great time. So,
Yeah.
folks, thanks for sticking around. I'd like for our guest here, Fleet, to reintroduce themselves. Fleet, tell folks in the chat where people can find you.
Sure. As a reminder, everybody, my name is Fleet Dietrich. My pronouns are they, she. You can find me on Twitter at Fleet_Dietrich, DETRIK. You can find my itch page, Fleet Dietrich. It's where all my games are being sold. I also have a website, fleetdietrich.com. You can find all my work there and what's up and coming. I have a lot of cool stuff on the way, including a solo journaling game that I'm building a brand new system for, and an entire podcast where I take solo journaling games and I turn them into narrative radio plays. Along with design interviews with the creators of the solo games. I talked to Spencer Campbell from Rune. It was a super cool conversation. Talked a lot about Elden Ring. But yeah, Follow me on Twitter to get updated. Take a look at my site. See if you're interested in buying shit. I love that. But yeah, that's me.
And you've been an absolute pleasure, and I'm looking
Thank
forward to
you.
working with you now.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been super fun.
Absolutely. And I'd like for my co-host to reintroduce himself, Omni.
Thank you, Red, as always. Hello, everyone. I'm the Last Omnitect, your favorite robot American, and you guys can catch me on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/the Last Omnitect, or on my Twitter, twitter.com/the Last Omnitect, all one word. I keep it pretty simple everywhere. And you guys, in fact, I will be live on Wednesday in the morning at 10:30 a.m. EST on the Rule Smithy, where I'm continuing to work and build on my legacy TTRPG system, which I will be running on my channel and on DMDM Studios come February. And among my players is, in fact, our eponymous host, Red. So keep an eye out on that. And other than that, you can catch me on all these folks' channels, on Red, on DMDM Studios, hell, even Alakazam occasionally. Spot me around. I play in a bunch of shit. So thank you as always, Red. I love doing this with you.
Thank you, man. This is our third season of the show, and you have always been a delight, and I appreciate it. And it's always nice to get your insights, especially when I'm just like sitting over here having like my weird ADHD autism brain moment where I'm just like sitting here like I can't think. I know the words I want to say, but I can't say them. And just and you two taking over for me. I always appreciate that. But I think 3 is a good number for this show. It's like it's not too much, but it's enough to like give somebody time to think while the other two are talking. So yeah, absolutely. Please be sure to check both of them out. I have their Twitters posted in the chat here. And folks, I really appreciate you. Thank you. We're going to be live next week, same time, same bat time, same bat channel. We're going to be live with GMJ Ashley, which she just so happens to be an author I actually co-wrote a book with. So short story. But yeah, I'm going to find somebody to raid into, and -2's up. Always going to raid into -2. Peace out, folks. Have a good one, and stay safe out there.